We take this opportunity also to congratulate all members of parliament who have been given new
Recording in
responsibilities.
progress.
As you have observed by His Excellency the President, and wish them best of luck with the support of members of the committee in the various responsibilities. We also have observed the tragic death of many of our people. We extend condolences to the government of the Free State. As you know that there was a tragic accident. We also extend the condolences to people who perished or a tragic accident in Groblersdal in Limpopo, and also at Hamakanya in the site of Mankweng. Also take this opportunity to extend a word of condolences to Honorable Pillay, who lost his uncle last night, and wish strength to all those in the grieving period. Members, you'll know that last week we did receive budget allocations or presentations from our stakeholders, IEC, Government Printing Works, Home Affairs, and Border Management Authority. And today we're going to receive the operational work of Border Management Authority. And we'll also note that there were concerns raised by ourselves as a committee in terms of the budget allocation to BMA that must link to the operation so that the objectives are met. And today we're going to receive that detailed brief, and members will be able to interact, including the preparations for the festive or the Easter weekend that is approaching. We'll also receive a detailed brief from the Home Affairs Minister or the DG around the matter of the Afghanistan. As you know that in the past 2 weeks, there have been this matter that they've been seized with by the Home Affairs and the courts. A detailed brief will be presented to the committee. We're also noting the new offices that have been demonstrated yesterday. Home Affairs must congratulate you the step forward in terms of access to the service to our people at Main Lane, and also the demonstration of the mobile trucks that the committee has resolved to be increased. I think there's a clear demonstration and collective work by the committee and Home Affairs, and the decision that we're taking in order to service our people. I think that is appreciated, and we think it must expand to other areas, both urban and rural areas, so that our people do receive better services. We are now going to invite Mr. Matonsi to run on the second item. Then we've dealt with the third item early in the morning. The committee has done with the adoption and outstanding minutes. And then we'll deal with the item number 4 and 6 at the same time. Immediately the commissioner presented the BMA, and the minister or the DG will present on the Afghanistan matter. Then members will interact, comments and questions. Then we'll deal with the item number 7 and invite Mr. Matonsi and Mr. Salmon to brief the committee on the 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4. Then we'll then have a summary on that, and the meeting then will adjourn. Can I invite Mr. Matonsi to render item number 2?
Yes, Chair. From my side, apologies is that of the Deputy Minister and Ms. Modise because of load shedding.
Noted. Apologies be noted. Can we now move to item number, the first item, Minister? Morning, the DG, morning, Commissioner Meta, and all commissioners and the DDG in attendance from Home Affairs. Morning. Can I invite the Minister to introduce the BMA, Border Management Authority? Director General.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning to honorable members and the colleagues from the BMA, and also colleagues from the IEC and the chairperson of the IEC. I hope the minister has been able to join. He was battling a minute earlier. Minister, I'm not sure if you're online already. Before
yes,
the
DG, thank you very much. I'm in. Hello.
Morning, Minister. I think the chairperson wanted you to introduce the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Morning, chairperson. Morning, honorable members. I'm very sorry I was really struggling for the past 15 minutes to come in. That's why I'm a bit 5 minutes late. Yeah, chairperson, this is an update on the operationalization of the BMA, which has been presented to you, I think, on quite a number of occasions. But this particular one is special, and you must regard it as such, because in exactly 3 weeks' time, the BMA will be a standalone 3A government entity. Because at the moment, ever since its establishment, it has been a branch under the Department of Home Affairs, which means the commissioner was reporting to myself and the DG in a way that the DGs heading branches in the department were doing. Now, on the 1st of April, all that is going to change. And how is the BMA going to be run? The BMA is going to be controlled by 10 ministers who will form an IMC in a way that a board maybe gets formed in SOEs, because BMA is not an SOE. It will just be a standalone 3A entity of the state, but it will be reporting to the 10 ministers who will be a statutory body meeting a minimum of 4 times a year, chaired by the Minister of Home Affairs and supported by a technical team, which will be chaired by the commissioner. The 10 ministers will be, as I said, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, the Minister of Agriculture and Land Development, the Minister of Environmental Affairs, Fisheries and Forestry, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Transport, the Minister of State Security, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Police. That's where the BMA will be reporting. So what they are showing you today is the route map towards that process. How far are we? What are the problems? Some of them have been presented to you last week already when we were presenting the budget. So I will ask the Commissioner, Dr. Masiapato, to take over and give the report, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Masiapato, you can proceed. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thanks, Minister and the committee members. Indeed, this is, I will say, probably the last report towards the operationalization, in view that on the 1st of April, we will then be operationalizing the BMA fully. And the subsequent reports after this will then be about substance and the work that is supposed to be done. Let me also give a bit of a disclaimer, Honorable Chair, on this presentation to say, because we are presenting to the committee on the operationalization of the Border Management Authority, there will be some parts of the presentation that looks technical, but that is the nature of the presentation, as we are supposed to demonstrate that indeed we have left no stone unturned in terms of making sure that we are ready for the 1st of April. So the purpose is indeed to update the members of the committee on the latest developments towards the operationalization of the Border Management Authority in view of the 1st of April as a Schedule 3A public entity. Now, in terms of the flow of the presentation, honorable members will remember that the last presentation we have given to yourselves was on the 22nd of November last year. This was within the context of the operationalization of the BMA. We know on the 28th, we were here and we presented on the budget-related issues. Now, on the basis that the last time we presented to yourselves on the operationalization was on the 22nd of November, before we then get to the latest and the key issues for today, we will then start by recapping on that presentation so that you will then be able to link what came out of that presentation versus what we have done from the 23rd of November to date in terms of preparing for the 1st of April. Now, the second issue that we will then be reflecting on are the key activities post the 22nd of November. And that is what we will then bring into your confidence. That involves the process that we had to undertake with the Minister of Public Service and Administration, particularly around the determination process, which was then to facilitate the process of the movement of the staff members from government, meaning from the public service into a public entity, which is the Border Management Authority. Subsequent to that, we'll also bring into confidence the conversation that we have had with the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council, representing all unions. And this was purely around the consultation processes that we had to do with all the affected staff members in terms of the process, as it were. So we'll basically reflect to yourselves what we have done up to that in terms of that part. The third bullet, you will remember in November, we reflected on the strategic plan that has been developed, and we had indicated at the time that we are hard at work finalizing even the annual performance plans, particularly for 2023-2024. So in this instance, we have just only escalated the APP aspects or the annual performance plan aspects without detail, but just to demonstrate that indeed we are very much ready in as far as the next financial year is concerned. And we are fairly aware that on the 28th of this month, we will be coming before yourselves to table the actual APP, as it were. Now, after that, we are then going to bring you into confidence on the work that we have done in the development of multiple policies that are going to be driving the implementation and the work that we have to be doing as the Border Management Authority, including some of the critical documents that are very much fundamental for an entity to be allowed to stand and be able to operate as an autonomous structure, as it were. Then we will then move to reflect on the current activities. These are the activities that we are busy with in this current month, which are the things that we are to be doing. Most of them are technical administrative activities to make sure that by the 31st of March, everything is ready to do the transition to the 1st of April. Then we will conclude by giving some bit of confidence to yourself around how ready we are to manage the transition, meaning post the 1st of April going into the future, which will then be inclusive of what the chair refers to as our preparedness for running the festive operation of Good Friday as it is on the way. And then we will then conclude. If we can then start, Honorable Chair, and just start by giving some bit of a recap on what we presented to yourselves. And on that basis, these are not necessarily new things. The first thing that we presented in the last conversation in November, we indicated to yourself that we have already mapped out the vision of the Border Management Authority. And that is to create a world-class integrated border law enforcement authority that seeks to partner for safe and prosperous South Africa. So that is the vision that has been developed for the Border Management Authority. And we can also confirm to the committee that it has been developed with all of the key stakeholders in the environment, including the 4 departments that we will then be doing frontline work on their behalf. We're able to bring in the colleagues on the ground, and we had to engage extensively to the point that we came to that kind of a vision. If you look at the mission, you will then realize there that we talk about being that credible provider of highly efficient, integrated, and well-coordinated and technology-driven border law enforcement authority. The key issue there is about us being technology-driven, and this is what we had already spoken to yourselves about, in November, as it were. In terms of the value proposition, as you can see there, the key issue there is that we are then to integrate all of the functions into one authority. That is the main principle. We are to seek the realization of a single command and control across all our ports of entry as well as border law enforcement areas. But more importantly, we have to make sure that the underlying principle of facilitation becomes the key in our value proposition. So if we look at the second slide, it is starting to do a recap on the 4 outcomes that we have already presented to yourselves in November. At that point, we did indicate to yourselves that there are 4. The first one is more of your corporate kind of an outcome. It is about institutional excellence distinguished by good corporate governance and ethical leadership. We then use the word ethical leadership intentionally, primarily with the view of the challenges around corruption that has been more, I would say, inherent in the environment. Hence, we talk to issues of ethics, as it were. And of course, the second outcome, committee members, this is the outcome where you will then be holding us accountable, in particular, in terms of the implementation of ensuring that we address the bigger problem statement of porous borders. Now, we are saying in this outcome, we need to secure our borders going into the future. And we do that because we need to protect the country's national interests, but at the same time, enhance our national security. So there are a lot of activities there, or there are a lot of targets that we have to realize. And of course, out of that, we need to make sure that trade and socio-economic development is realized in the jurisdiction. And of course, in terms of outcome 4, it links with the provision of Section 5, subsection C of the Border Management Authority Act, the one that talks about having to coordinate our effort with a number of stakeholders in the environment, either local and international. And that is why outcome 4, it is strictly reflecting on the relationship that we will have even with our neighboring countries as part of facilitating the movement and also as part of addressing issues of interjurisdictional crimes, as it were. Now, the next slide is basically a recap of what we have presented to yourselves. You'll remember here, we indicated that we are to get around 1,950 staff complement that will be coming from the 4 departments as identified clearly on the slide. So in this instance, we can then agree that this is what we had presented to yourselves with the view that all of these are to be integrated, which will then make us realize a single commander platform across the ports of entry. And then all of those things that used to be departments will then be work streams within the Border Management Authority. Whether it's immigration issues will be a work stream in the environment and no longer Department of Home Affairs on the ground. Port health, the same. Environmental, the same, as well as agriculture, the same. And of course, the committee members will remember the issue of border or access control, which is the responsibility we have to then be taking from SAPS, as it were. And of course, that is the area that we do know that there are some bit of challenges there around the capacitation of the BMA to be able to fully take over that responsibility, as it were. So this is what we presented to yourselves in the last conversation. Now, this part of the slide is truly just a breakdown, just to demonstrate that as part of the engagement with labor, it had been that we can't just talk about just numbers. We have to be very much practical in terms of identifying the actual positions or the actual portfolios. On this particular slide, you will realize this is where the 1,225 people that are going to be coming out of the Department of Home Affairs looks like. The majority, as you can see on the slide, are the immigration officers, 966. These are the colleagues on the ground who are effectively doing immigration work. And of course, they are to come over and we are fully accounting for each one of them and each one of the portfolio, as it were. And of course, just for you also noting, you will see the 2 directors there, which is what we call the SMSs or the Senior Management Service that are also coming through. Only 2 SMSs coming out of Home Affairs into the Border Management Authority. If you look at the next slide, you will realize the numbers now, the breakdown in terms of the Department of Environmental, or the department that deals with forestry, fisheries, and the environment. As we have indicated to yourselves, they are bringing only 14 colleagues on the ground, and that already demonstrates the numbers that we need to make sure we augment, because there is no way we can protect the country from a bio security point of view with only 14 officials. And I can also indicate to the committee members that most of the colleagues are truly at OR Tambo and nothing else, effectively meaning in the rest of the jurisdiction or the rest of the areas where people can enter the country from a biosecurity, biodiversity related aspect, we are very much vulnerable. And of course, we need to be able to augment those numbers. Port health, I think you will see the numbers there. The majority of them are environmental health practitioners scattered across the various ports. And as we have said, there are in 37 of the ports out of the 72, as it were. So these are the numbers. And of course, these are the, I would say, the portfolios that are coming through. So what we had to do, honorable members, in this was to make sure that we are able to translate each of these portfolios into the BMA permanent structure. And of course, the refinement still remains within the same articulation in terms of those key portfolios, and make sure that everybody is accounted for. Now, this is the last slide that gives a breakdown in terms of the numbers. These are the colleagues coming from agriculture, land reform, and rural development. As you can see, the majority of the people here are agricultural, food, and quarantine technicians. These are the people who are on the ports, making sure that the quality of the food that we export out of the jurisdiction fit into the export destinations on the other side. And similarly, those that are coming into the country are fitting into those particular requirements, as it were, and all of those. So basically, this is the essence in terms of the portfolios, as it were. Now, this is the last slide on the recap, Honorable Chair and members. You will remember this is the model of integration that we've spoken about. So effectively, from the 1st of April, as we have indicated, all the 4 uniforms in particular will then be retired in as far as the ports of entry is concerned. All of the colleagues that are going to be doing the specialist work, meaning the work in terms of environmental, agriculture, health, as well as immigration, will all be wearing your corporate-based uniform, as you can see it on the top part. And of course, they will be wearing a specialist insignia. And of course, those that are doing support will be wearing that, as we've indicated. And of course, those that are doing law enforcement will then be wearing, as the border guards on the bottom part, on the left, wearing the enforcement insignia. Of course, those that are helping us with other auxiliary, like your cleaning service, driving, and all of those mechanical kind of work will be wearing the auxiliary insignia. So this is basically, I would say, the recap in as far as the conversation that we had with yourselves on November 2022. We had to start there, honorable members, to make sure that when we now update you as to where we are, you are able to do that linkage. Now, let's then move into the latest. What have we done from November to date? One, what we had to do, which effectively moved the operational functions from the respective 4 departments into the Minister of Home Affairs, which he subsequently then delegated those functions to the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. So on that basis, we then had to do some technical work to make sure that we facilitate now the proclamation. What that meant was we had to get the signatures of the 4 ministers, the signatures of the directors generals, the signatures of the chief financial officers from the 4 departments, which were effectively making an agreement that indeed those colleagues as identified and those portfolios as identified, they are leaving the 4 departments, they are following the functions which the president has moved from those departments into the BMA through a presidential proclamation. And I will then say that work, we have done most of it during December. And that was, I will say, the period that we have done most of that work. After that, we then had to then make sure all of those documentation get presented to the Minister of Public Service and Administration, who then had to approve the determination, which then legally authorizes the exit of those colleagues out of the department or outside the 4 departments, now coming into the Border Management Authority. It was on the basis of that we had to take all those documentations to the National Treasury, so that the National Treasury will then do a reconfiguration of the allocations or the reconfiguration in terms of the estimate of national expenditure. You will remember, as you were there, when the minister was then making a presentation in terms of the allocations. So out of that, based on the documentation presented, the Minister of National Treasury had to move or shift 1.1 billion from the 4 departments into the Border Management Authority. This is now the financials that were confirmed by the CFO signatures, demonstrating that this money now follows the people, and the people had actually followed the function. Arising from that, we then had, as we presented to yourself on the 28th, then got a new allocation, which is new money to the BMA, which is 250 million. And I think the chair had already indicated that if we can put aside the money that came with the people, and then we just look at new money, it is not enough. And I think we have spoken in detail on that. But of course, we are hoping that as we go forward, we should be able to get that addressed. So the issue here is that all of those administrative technical issues had fairly been followed to the T, and of course, each and every aspect had been followed through. Now we are saying, when all of that was done, now we had to then go back to the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council, represented by all key labor in as far as this process is concerned. And I can also indicate the two key unions in this instance being the Public Servants Association as well as NEHAU in this process. So when we went to the council, we then agreed with the council that we needed to create a task team, which is the Border Management Authority task team. And that task team was to drive this particular integration process. From labor side, it was for them to be there to make sure that they oversee the activities and they make sure that their members are fairly protected and there is no anything that will then discriminate or actually jeopardize their careers and all. So arising from the engagement that we had with the unions, we then signed what is called the integration agreement. It was then signed by the Minister of Public Service and Administration on behalf of government, and ultimately that has to be affirmed by labor in this process. So there are certain principles that we've agreed on in the integration process. I'm not going to be detailed on this, but some of the key ones were: one, this is about staff moving following the functions, and that process must be done with validated job content. Effectively, what we had to do on the BMA side, looking into the portfolios coming on our side and make sure that we map them out and we are able to demonstrate that these functions are indeed supporting the functions that are actually moved by the president within the context of the legislative frameworks, as it were. But secondly, that this is a transfer, and this particular process should not interrupt the service of the members. So if you have 10 years working for Home Affairs, when you come to BMA, it becomes year 11, you continue. You don't say, I resign Home Affairs, I now start from zero. So effectively means continuation of service. All of those issues were guaranteed. And in this instance, we can indicate that whatever the people will then come into BMA as it were, it will be as good as being in the other department, as it were, from a service point of view. And of course, as you will remember, the integration agreement complied with Section 97 provisions of the Labor Relations Act, as well as Section 189. This is the process that is well defined in our labor relations regime. And of course, we have to follow each and every aspect in as far as this part is concerned. The other issue, obviously, that had to be guaranteed is the whole issue of job security. And in this instance, the key part is nobody is to lose any job in this particular process. And of course, the last part is transparency in this particular process, to the extent that when we were to do all of these things, labor was just with us and we were effectively doing that as a collective. Now, after we have done the integration process, after we have cleared everything with labor, now we have to start the process to consult with the staff complement that is over. So in this particular process, what we did, and by the way, this is what we did earlier, you will see this 18 October, we met with all leadership from across the ports. So here we talk about port managers, we talk about supervisors and all of those. The intention was to do leadership alignment seminar, make sure that everybody from a leadership point of view understand the BMA, understand the protocols, understand the processes, and also all of the key facets about this particular journey, as it were. And of course, out of that, we were able now to start the process in terms of now engaging with the rest of the complement. You will see there that we started on the 5th of December. You will remember, honorable members, when we spoke to you on the 22nd of November, we indicated we are starting consultations in December. Indeed, we ran the consultations, as you can see, across all the regions. You will remember BMA has 4 regions. it being your northern region, your eastern, your central, and your southern. So we literally ran them through those particular regions. And as you can see, in the first round of consultation, we saw 748 members across those streams, as it were. Now, after that, we then agreed we will have to do the second round, which is what we did in January. So in January, we started on the 16th, and we went into all of those particular areas, as you can see on screen, which I do not think is necessary to recite what is very clear there. But the key principle is we had to go to all of these areas to be able to see the members, as it were. So you will then realize, honorable members, that what we had to do was to do 2 rounds in each and every area. And the reason there was that those that are at work, we will then see those that are off work, and then the following day or the period after, they then exchange. Others have to go to work and others have to come through, because we are doing this process whilst the ports have to be running at the same time. And that is the essence. So all in all, when we are done with the process, we saw in terms of the first, second round, 1,633 staff complement. And arising from there, we can say on the second round, we saw around 885 all in all. Now, when we engaged with labor, just on the basis of the ones that we couldn't see, there was no issue, because we then understood each other to say there is 306 that did not make it to the public consultations, as it were. But there will be more effort on the one-on-one engagements, where they will then be engaged with their HR and all of that, which is what the next slide will then talk to. So that is the point. But I'm saying labor's experience said this is over 80% in terms of the public consultative engagement, which in terms of the experience is very high and of course is very reasonable, as it were. And I suppose we have done what we're supposed to have done. Now, the second slide has to now represent labor representation out of the 1,950. And we can confirm the leading union in this instance is PSA, that is the Public Servants Association, with over 1,000, and then followed by NAHA with over 600. So that is the spread. And I think you can see the rest of the other unions there. The reason why this slide becomes critical is because as part of this particular process, we had very intensive engagement with labor. And the ultimate agreement was that people, as they come into the BMA, they then come with their union membership or union representation. What practically this will mean, departments will then have to stop at the point of transition, the deductions, and we have to do so and then make sure that we then send to labor. Ultimately, as you will know, once the BMA is on the ground, it means the first point of call will be PSA, and then there will be engagements around the determinations, and people can still decide to change union membership in the way that they might want. But the key issue is, as the transition stands, this is the guarantee in terms of union membership to the BMA, as it were, and we should be able to deal with the rest of the other labor-related issues going to the future. So this is very much clear, and of course, this is how things are. Now, all of that is what we have to be doing administratively and very much critical. Now, the issue is, as we prepare the people, they need to come into the BMA and they need to get proper clarity in terms of the work that they need to do. And that is from the 1st of April. So that is now the annual performance plan. And as you will know, as I've indicated, we had to juxtapose the functions that they're bringing through against what they then need to be doing into the BMA, but also be able to enrich some of the portfolios, as it were. And I think you will be able to appreciate some of those technicalities. For instance, if somebody has just been a port manager, or actually a port manager for OR Tambo, and that person was from immigration, that person was only dealing with immigration issues. But in the BMA, a port commander at OR Tambo is no longer just dealing with immigration. That person is accountable for immigration, accountable for agriculture, accountable for health, accountable for environmental, but also accountable for access control. That already then brings a different, enriched portfolio, as it were. And that is why we then have to make sure that all of those integrated portfolios are well built. Now, in the context of this next slide, we are now saying we had to make sure that the annual performance plan is concluded. So in this instance, we are just giving you some snippet. Like I said, we are not going to go into the details because on the 28th, we are coming with the real details. So in this instance, we are saying, out of the 4 outcomes that we have presented to yourself in November, coming from the strat plan, there are 5, I would say, targets that runs over a 5-year period. That is your strat plan period, as you will know. And these are the 5 targets. The first one is realizing an integrated good governance framework for the BMA, so that the BMA becomes fully established. So in this instance, we are basically talking about over the next 5 years, we need to still keep on making sure that BMA, ultimately, all the governance frameworks are fully established over that period. And we are saying as we come in, all the fundamentals are on the table. But of course, over that period, we need to then perfect other aspects as we go into the future. The second aspect was obviously intelligence and risk capability, fully established and fully implemented. That is over a 5-year period. As I say, these are strategy targets, as it were. And that is in the context of the National Targeting Center, Port Targeting Centers, and Regional Targeting Centers. We are saying in 5 years' time, all of those will be completely on the ground and fully functional. And this particular one here is about 6 priority land ports of entry, functional as secure trade and travel-friendly one-stop border post. You will remember there is that process that must take place in the redevelopment of the 6 ports, ultimately make them a one-stop border post. This target says in 5 years' time, all of that will be done, meaning the redesigning, redevelopment, and ultimately all those 6 will be functioning and six one-stop border posts. And of course, we will be able to add others as we go into the future. And of course, the last one just talks about 11 agreements with key stakeholders will then be fully signed and implemented. There we talk about agreements with our neighboring countries, as well as agreements with other key stakeholders to make sure we are able to function in the manner that we are supposed to be. So in terms of the strat plan provisions, as you can see it on screen, we can then agree that out of those particular outcomes, these are the 4 outcomes. Now, these are now the APP targets. So I'm not going to be going into the details like I've indicated that we'll talk the details on the 28th, but I just want to indicate that these are the 5 targets that are linked to the first outcome. You will remember the first outcome is more of your corporate kind of outcome. That is why when you look at the targets, here are targets that you are familiar with. For example, 100% of valid invoices paid within 30 days. Those are the kind of targets you will find in all of the entities and all of the departments and all of that. So you, for example, disaster management plan getting approved and all of that. So all of these are the targets linked to the first outcome, like I said, which is corporate based. Now, the main target, as I've indicated, the main outcome is the number 2 outcome, the one about securing borders, protecting national interests, and enhancing national security. You will see this one carries the largest number of targets, and that is 6, because this is what we describe as the core business. So in here, as I've indicated, it's about the NTC, that is the National Targeting Center established as the proposed operating model, which is the business case and all of those issues. And now you will see there we're now talking about now the reports coming out of the National Targeting Center being utilized. Here we now talk substance. These are the reports that must tell us this port is vulnerable for this kind of criminality, and this is the nature of the intensity of countermeasures we need to put on the table and be able to deal with those issues, as it were. 2.3 talks about rolling out into the additional 2 segments in terms of the border law enforcement areas, as it were. And some of these targets, they came out of the targets that were embedded in the department when we were being in transition. And you will then see now the health ones are starting to come in, because as we do this work, we are now starting to bring the health, we are now starting to bring agriculture and all of those kind of issues. And that's why you will see on 2.6, we now talk about now the detection of illegitimate persons. This is now in the port, but also at the immediate outer perimeter of the port, as it were. Now, this is basically now the one that deals with the trade facilitation outcome 3, and of course, you will see there are 3 there, 3 targets. If you look at 3.1, you will realize that now we start to talk about CITES consignments. That is the kind of work that is embedded in what the colleagues from agriculture have to be doing on the ground, and that is basically what we need to be doing as we move. And of course, you will see the OSBP issues coming to the space. And of course, with the last one is all about our cooperation with the key stakeholders. Hence, you will see the SAPS, SARS, and SNDF in terms of the implementation protocol, the mechanics of our working together and ultimately making sure that we achieve the objective of securing the environment. And of course, the last one is your community crossing points and all of those, and how we need to get that facilitated. So effectively, we talk about 16 targets for the Border Management Authority, which are to be implemented in 2023-2024 financial year. And as I've indicated, when we come to yourselves in the next financial year, we will no longer be talking much about establishment, this and that, meaning we are moving away from administrative reports to yourselves. We will be talking substance issues, and that will start to be accountable, or accounting in terms of these targets is concerned. Now, as I've indicated, the last segment of the slides starts to touch around the issues of the policies as well as the key documents that had to be concluded. So what we have done here, Honorable Chair and the committee members and minister, is we did not try to say we can then bring this before yourselves. These are hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. These are the documents that are to drive the functioning of the authority, as it were. You will see, for example, an HR strategy already concluded, and this has been what was driving the integration process. The staff migration and placement model had already been set, and this is what we are actually using in terms of moving people from their departments, integrating them into the Border Management Authority. The organizational structure is exactly where people must go and fit into. And you will remember we presented to yourselves only top level 3 structures. One was the national and 2 was the provincial, the regional, and the last one was the port level. So we did demonstrate to yourself that the organizational structure has been done. But obviously it goes beyond what we presented, because we go into the details beyond just the high level we did. Job profiles, as I've said, we have done all of those. The key work here was to move the functions and take the jobs themselves, but also make them integrated, no longer just as silos as they used to be, as it were. And that is in line, by the way, with the standard operating procedures that we had to refine at the port level and all of those kind of issues. Job competency framework already concluded, and all of those becomes key. Change management strategy, as I've said the other time, and the plan had already been concluded. We are then, for example, this week, orientating what we call the change champions. These are the people selected from across the ports. They will basically be on the ground, managing the change on the ground with the colleagues on the ground, and make sure that there is no any confusion on that. So I'm not going to try and recite all the HR policies, Honorable Chair. I think we can see all of those policies. Recruitment, how do we recruit? Disciplinary, how do we deal with that? Employee equity within the context of our labor relations regime, grievance procedures, occupational health issues, your sexual harassment related, all of those issues are on the ground, including our training and development policy model. And this is basically an integrated training, no longer just on immigration, but across the value chain. And of course, the ICT related issues on the ground there. ICT strategy already set, ICT architecture and the blueprint already set, as well as the governance framework. The only unfortunate reality on the ICT, as the chair and the committee members know, is that an ICT space is a bit of an expensive space. So with the 250 million that we got, we will not be able to do most of the ICT integration. And I think that is something that is very much a bit unfortunate for now, but we suppose that we should be able to, with the leadership of the minister, and I suppose by yourselves as the committee members, be able to assist us as we go into the future to be able to get some financial muscles to be able to do those issues. I mean, ICT things are very much pricey, as it were, and we are not going to be very much unpractical and say that we'll be able to do all. But what I can assure the committee members is everything has been set. The strategy is very much key. The architecture is very much key. The blueprint is very much key. We just need the resourcing of that so that we can be able to implement it. But in the next financial year, 2023-2024, we'll not be able to do much of what we have put on the table based on those documentation. Now, if we then move to the last part of the slide, these are now the current activities in the current month of March. Now, we are going to demonstrate to you what is done by the 4 departments and ultimately what is done by us as the new employer, the BMA. Only 2 slides. The first is the slide in terms of the 4 departments. Now, we have engaged with the colleagues in the HR work stream, and we have then agreed that they need to do these activities from the 1st of March until the 15th. These are the 4 departments. What are they supposed to be doing? They do what is called one-on-one. So in this instance, it means the HR from the respective 4 departments are now sitting down with the colleagues that are coming into the BMA. Remember, we have already consulted them, but there are those 300 over that we haven't. But this consultation will then be able to cover that through. So what they do, they then give them what we call the exit letter out of their departments to the BMA. That exit letter has been crafted collectively under the leadership of the Department of Public Service and Administration. It's a common letter across all the 4 departments. It actually talks the fundamental principles in law. Your functions has moved through proclamation, and it demonstrates that you have to then follow the functions, and obviously your resources have to follow you and all of that. So here we are then saying part of that, they will then include what we call a personal report about that individual member, saying this is your salary that you've been getting here, these are all the benefits that you've been getting here, these are the number of leave days that you have, and all of that. That personal report is what the member exits with. When they come to the BMA side, we then integrate them with all of those benefits. Now, the next thing they needed to do, we have engaged with labor that some of the labor disputes issues between the employer-employee with the 4 departments, they need to finalize those that are practically possible to be finalized. But for those that they might not be able to resolve, they must be able to package the reports properly. That must come with the file of the colleagues into the BMA, demonstrating clearly what is an outstanding issue on labor about that particular individual. And we should be able to take that process further as the new employer being the Border Management Authority. So this, as I said, Honorable Chair, this presentation has some technical aspect, but I suppose they are able to give you into clarity in terms of what we are busy with on the ground. Now, on the BMA side, what is it that we are doing? One, from the 15th, once the colleagues have done all of that, by the way, we can confirm to yourselves with a few days to go that the colleagues are on par in terms of engaging with the staff complement across all of the ports, and everything is going according to plan. So from the 15th, we then have now to start engaging these colleagues as now the incoming employees into the BMA. As you will remember, we will still be assisted by HR from the Department of Home Affairs. You will remember last week we have indicated that process around Home Affairs continuing to be assisting us there and there as we go along. In this instance, we are going to be engaging them. Part of that process will obviously be to also issue them the appointment certificates into the BMA. And I think here I need to say, Honorable Chair, that we talk here about an appointment certificate, which is not just an appointment and basic appointment card. This is the card for people who are to become law enforcement, and this is the card they need to produce in instances they need to be doing search and seizure, or also even as they do arrest. Almost the same card that is used in the police environment. And that is the card that will be catching for all of the colleagues as they come through into the environment. When I say all, I just mean those that are in the core side. We're not going to be issuing a similar card, for instance, those that are doing your cleaning service, for example, and all of that. So all of those dissections are very much clear. Now, the next issue in this particular month, we are going to start the process of uniform distribution so that the colleagues are ready that from the 1st of April, they should be able to move with that unity as we have spoken about. And the other issue here, which is very much critical to note, is that then when the colleagues had come on board and we have done now the process of integrating them, their salaries and everything, then we are going to enter into a process of alignment of salaries. This is on the basis that the people come sometimes with different functionalities, different functions. The people from health, for example, they came with occupational special dispensation. They are sitting at lower rank by post, but they're sitting at high levels by salary, primarily because they've been doing high expert work, and therefore the department couldn't necessarily pay them where they were sitting because of the specialist work they do. So as we integrate, the colleagues will be doing that standardization, and there's going to be some shifts in terms of making sure that everything is aligned. Because as you will know, the principle is equal work for equal pay. So there's no way that people are then going to be sitting in disparate environment without a very clarity in as far as that part is concerned. And then from there, the biggest issue, we are going to then activate change process in terms of the activation of the 10 champions that I've indicated. Now, last part, I keep on saying last, this is the real last. This one is now after the 1st of April. So after the 1st of April, here we are saying, what is it that is to be happening now from the 1st of April? I think it was Honorable Lokwase who said, you're doing the integration on the 1st, but Good Friday will just be there a week after. What does that mean? So from where we are sitting, we can confirm to the committee members that we have started the planning in as far as the Easter festive operations is concerned, and everything is going according to plan. And I think the committee members will remember that we were able to implement a very good plan in December. And on that basis, we are going to be deploying most of the mechanics that we used in December, even in this period. And on that basis, we are definitely going to be on the ground in doing all of that. But what are we going to be doing from the 1st of April? Some of the things that we're going to be doing, obviously, is induction. Induction in this instance, meaning we are now bringing the colleagues into the law enforcement space, the integrated space. But the other thing we're going to be doing, we're going to be training the colleagues, one, in terms of the law enforcement protocols and law enforcement activities, but also to demonstrate that now we are implementing integrated standard operating procedures on the ground. No longer the SOP for immigration, SOP agriculture, now it is integrated SOP. So we need to be training colleagues in as far as that part is concerned. The next part, as we have discussed on the 28th, which is last month, is the activation of the shared service arrangement with the Department of Home Affairs is going to be assisting us with. And again, you will remember we have said it last week or the other week, this is embedded on the financials that we have. So they'll be assisting us in terms of the financial issues, your asset issues, facility issues, bit of legal issues, and all of those as we get our capacity fully grounded. I have already spoken about the Easter festive operations. After that, we will then make sure that the placement of the staff complement into the permanent structure is completely in order. And of course, the harmonization of the conditions of service, I have already spoken about that. The other one is the onboarding of the 21 additional border guards. You will remember we did this recruitment, particularly to go to the Eastern Cape, Lesotho, as well as KZN Lesotho environment, because those are the areas that we didn't have the complement. But now we have these colleagues, they will be onboarded and we will be taking them to those particular areas. And then we will be doing a lot of other administrative things like the branding of all of the transferred assets from the departments into the BMA. All of them will then be branded as the Border Management Authority, and of course, the rest of the other activities. Now, for the committee is basically to say, note the progress that we have done in as far as this process is concerned, and also to indicate your support as you continue to guide us in this process. Obviously, with the minister closer and the DM in this particular process, with the view that we need to secure borders for development. In conclusion, which is the last statement, Honorable Chair, is to say, when we have done all of these activities from April, we've done the training, we've done the induction, everybody is now grounded in terms of uniform and everything. The colleagues will then be functioning without being ranked, meaning without the ranks being put on them. What is going to happen is a month, 2 or 3 after, we are going to be very much clear to yourselves. There has to be a launch date wherein the minister, together with the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, supposed to then launch the 3rd law enforcement authority in the country. And that is when the commissioners will be commissioned. They will be ranked, and then from there, they will rank the rest of the colleagues. And from there, BMA, after the launch, will be fully established as the 3rd law enforcement authority in the Republic after or given Section 199, subsection 3 of the Constitution. So thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I hope it was not long. Thanks.
No. Thanks, Commissioner. That I think was necessary for detailed brief on the Border Management Authority progress. I'm going to now invite the Minister to immediately deal with the Afghanistan matter, then I invite members to interact on the 2 presentations. Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. Chairperson, you may remember that in August 2021, the US announced that they are now pulling out of Afghanistan after a 20-year presence. And of course, when they pulled out, the Taliban, which was henceforth displaced, will obviously come back and take over the governance of that country, which they were doing before the US came in. The US then announced at that time that they are worried, and justifiably so, of course, that the people who are Afghans who were working for them or with them in the governance of the country for 20 years might actually be victimized by the Taliban and be persecuted. And they said it will be important for them to be relocated to the US, where they'll be given permanent status. I'm sure that that information I'm mentioning is common knowledge, which we all picked up from the media, all of us. Then in September, to our surprise, we received a letter addressed to His Excellency, the President of the country, and then copied to the Minister of Home Affairs and to the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, but also to the Minister of DERCO, International Relations and Cooperation. Basically, the letter was from a law firm somewhere in Roteboer. The letter was saying, look, they represent an American NGO, and the aim of the letter is to inform us that there are 2 plane loads of people from Afghanistan, which plane loads are in Pakistan, in Islamabad, en route to South Africa. And that South Africa is requested to facilitate their entry into the country. And South Africa must not worry about the cost, food, living conditions, and all that. The American NGO will pay for that. All that South Africa must do is to find a place for these people to stay. And it's not known how long they will stay. They may stay for 6 months or forever or whatever, but some of them may be en route to the US. That's the letter we received. The letter ended up by lecturing us about our international obligations and the South African legal framework and principles, as well as the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Is quite a lengthy letter a lengthy part of this letter about our international obligation, etc. Of course, Chair, we took offense. We discussed the matter with Minister Pandor, and we thought this is really something that is not on. And we took offense and refused to cooperate with this. I forgot to mention the letter further requests us to consult the Pakistan government and inform them to facilitate the move of these people through their country into South Africa. So as I said, we ignored it. DERCO actually issued a statement, which was issued by the DDG Public Diplomacy, Clayson Monyela, mentioning that South Africa is not going to do that and we're not comfortable about it. Then fast forward 2023, on the 15th of February, 2023, our officials, the immigration head of Beitbridge, from another law firm, different from the one in 2021. This law firm is somewhere in Melrose Arc. The letter is simply saying, we represent 22 clients, and they never mentioned their names. They never mentioned their nationality. They never mentioned where they come from. They just said we represent 22 clients who will soon approach Beitbridge Border Post. You are requested to prepare for them, to facilitate for them entry visas in terms of Section 23 of the Immigration Act so that they come into South Africa to apply for asylum. Because our officials have never seen asylum being conducted in this manner. We are used to asylum of people who are running away, who approach and say, I'm going to apply for asylum. In other words, we are not used to a situation where application for asylum is preceded by a letter from a huge legal firm giving instructions on what must happen. So, but while the officials were still surprised, on the 16th of February, indeed, a bus arrived at Beitbridge carrying 25 people, 3 of whom were American nationals who said they are part of an NGO. I must warn, Chairperson, or sorry, I must state, not warn, that in terms, legally speaking, and in terms of these documents, it is not mentioned anywhere that these people were part of the original 126 that was mentioned in the previous letter. I'm mentioning from our point of view because we see it as more or less the same process. But I want to warn that there's no way where they say in 2021 we did write to you, etc. Because this is also a different law firm. Be that estimate, the people arrived, and one of the 3 Americans, who's a lady, got into the port and said they are applying for asylum. Obviously, the official was surprised why somebody will apply for asylum while carrying an American passport. Well, as you know, we've never had a situation where anybody from America apply for asylum in South Africa. So the gentleman, our official had the right to ask, and he was told that no, we're actually applying for asylum for 22 Pakistani nationals who are in the bus with us. And it's then that they realized that this is part of the letter which was received the day before. So they asked if one of them who understands English can come into the port. And when he arrived, he produced a passport, which is an Afghan passport. But inside the passport, there is a multi-entry visa into Zimbabwe, showing that Zimbabwe has given them a visa which they can use many times to enter and get out of Zimbabwe for a period of 30 days. So obviously we're curious. We had to contact the Zimbabwean authorities and ask them. And they said, yes, about the authenticity of that visa. They confirmed that, yes, the visa was issued by them. These people came in from Afghanistan, they went to Pakistan, they went to Qatar, then they went to Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, they said they are on holiday, they are holiday makers, and they were given a visa on arrival. Maybe at this juncture, I need to explain, Chairperson, because during the question time last year, I heard somebody talking about us giving visa on arrival to people from Europe, but denying them for people from the African continent. South Africa has not yet issued visas on arrival. We don't have that. Is a process that is still under discussions. But Zimbabwe seems to be having, because they issued them these visas on arrival, as they said, they are holiday makers, but it was for 30 days. So be that as it may, we were then surprised why somebody who went to Zimbabwe as a holiday maker and went through all these countries is now coming to South Africa as an asylum seeker. And of course, the officials did not allow them in. And the following day, on the 17th of February, they then came back to the same Beitbridge border post. This time they were armed with a court order. The court order that is saying we must allow them in as an interim measure. As an interim measure, the court is sort of an interdict, Chairperson, to say let them come in and apply for asylum. And on the 7th of March, remember that time it was still the 17th of February. They said on the 7th of March, there will be a court case to hear this matter, a return date, that's what is called, after an interdict. So, but we were surprised, Chair, because we were not even aware that there's a court case. since we were not served any papers. Usually, when somebody is litigating against you, they do send you papers in which they write the things on which they are litigating you. Then you are supposed to defend yourself. In this case, we're not aware of that until we realized that while the court case took place here in Pretoria, the High Court in Pretoria, the papers were served also, I mean, at Beitbridge border post, just like the letters. They were served there to this port official, who obviously being a supervisor at the port, doesn't stay in the office. He moves around supervising. He was not aware that he has been served with papers because they were served on an email. They did not hand them over to him. They were sent into his email. He only opened his email after 4 hours and discovered these papers. By the time he sent them to head office, the court case was over and they were granted this interim order to enter the country. But fortunately, in the same court order, the judge has written that the Department of Home Affairs is given 24 hours to come and anticipate in terms of rules of anticipation, anticipate this date of the 7th of March, meaning you can come and argue a case before that 7th of March. We took advantage of that part of the ruling. And indeed, on Saturday, the 18th of February, the court case set again in Pretoria, where we put our case. They were insisting that the order must be implemented and the minister is in contempt of court for not allowing the order to go through. But then the judge did not agree. The judge said the best they can do is to move the date of the 7th of March to the 20th of February. So when he said so, it was on the 18th, Saturday, the 18th of February. He then said, on Monday, the 20th, please come to court. Let's have a court case of what we would have originally had on the 7th of March. That court case set and the judgment was reserved. Then last week on Tuesday, the judgment came out, which said they confirmed the first order. The Department of Home Affairs must allow them in just to go to a refugee reception center and apply for asylum. During those court cases, Chairperson, the lawyers produced a document written in Arabic, which they said is a warrant from the Taliban about these people. I can't remember whether they said it's a warrant of arrest or a warrant of whether a death warrant or something like that, but a warrant to that effect from the Taliban was produced in court. And our argument was that because the document is not even translated and we don't even understand what it's saying, and it's not even authenticated, we argued that it can't be accepted, Chairperson, because in our understanding of legal matters internationally, is that when you introduce a document from another country, firstly, it must be translated into the local language or official language, one of the official languages of the country in which it's submitted. And in terms of the Vienna Convention, it must be authenticated at least by the Department of Foreign Affairs from the country of origin, which says, yes, this document originated from such and such, and we can account for that and send it to you. Is then that it comes into court. But in this case, we argued that, but it looks like the judge did not buy our story. In the final judgment, he said all those arguments about authenticity of document or all that will be argued during the process of applying for asylum. Once we allow them in and they start applying for asylum, then it's then that will put those arguments, whether they brought authentic documents, whether they've been authenticated, whether what they say is written in Arabic, what they say it says it is actually true, and maybe even give us an English version. That's what the judgment was. So, Chairperson, the other thing that was raised in court, but which the judge did not accept because he said it's not in the affidavit, was that they argued that they went to Afghanistan and they were there when the Taliban came into Afghanistan, into Pakistan. They went from Afghanistan into Pakistan, and while they were there, the Taliban followed them to Pakistan and attacked them, and that's why they left. The judge rejected that type of evidence on the basis that it was not on their affidavit. They can't just start raising it in court. And so, Chairperson, we issued a statement, as you may remember, immediately after that judgment, that the department will abide, because we are a constitutional democracy, we abide by whatever the court has said. But subsequent to that, Chairperson, and in consultation with other people within the state, quite a number of people were not happy about this within the state, about us just saying we'll concede. They believe this matter must be appealed, that we need to appeal this judgment, because the fear here was that if you look at that judgment, it says these people have a reason to be scared of their lives, etc. In essence, it will mean anybody in any part of the world who become fearful can just take whatever they have or pick up whatever they have and rush to the nearest border in South Africa. That's basically the essence. And that was disturbing many people, that will this be an opening of the floodgates? Of course, in the statement we issued, we said our acceptance of the judgment does not mean we want floodgates to be open for the people just to come running into South Africa. But that's us saying so. And we don't know what will happen. So people were worried that if the judgment is not challenged, it might actually mean something like that. So we then decided to look for legal advice outside the department, outside the state. In other words, to go out to the senior councils that exist within the borders of our country and ask for a legal advice about this matter. Unfortunately, Chairperson, as you know, just like with the issues of CETA, we are not able to procure our own services. We've got to go through CETA. In terms of legal services, it's the same problem. You have got to go through the state attorney's office. You can't just go to a lawyer and choose them and represent me. And that takes time, because it's a procurement process. I must say that it takes time. That's why up to today, since last week when we started this, we have not even as yet received the legal advice. I don't know, the DG will tell whether they've even appointed the legal firm that must give that or not. But as I'm talking to you, we don't have that legal advice. So then where are the people? I'm sure that's the question you are going to be asking us. Because Zimbabwe gave them 30 days, their 30 days expired on the 19th, Sunday, the 19th of February. That means a day before this final court case, which we lost, said, Zimbabwe then said, look, the visas we gave 30 days have expired, you need to go. I'm emphasizing that because in the judgment, the judge is saying something to the effect that they were expelled from Zimbabwe or they were sent away from Zimbabwe, etc. They were not. Their period of stay there was just over, in the same way as many countries in the world do. You can go to the US. If you were given permission to stay for the 5 days, on the 5th day, they'll come to the hotel wherever you are and say, no, your time is over. So that's what Zimbabwe did. And we are made to understand somebody in Zambia, in the American embassy, at least that's what we've had, arranged for them to go to Zambia, also on a visa, a visitor's visa. And up to so far, we believe that's where they are, in Zambia. Now, last week, as this matter was debated over the radios, etc., on SAFM, I was called with a lawyer of these individuals. And they were asked, why specifically choose South Africa? If the people went to Pakistan, then to Qatar, then to Zimbabwe, then they are in Zambia, why Is it all those countries they are just passing or getting visitors, visa or holiday, but in South Africa it becomes asylum? The gentleman said they've studied the laws of all these countries and believe that the country that is easy to enter or possible to enter will be South Africa. That's why they chose us. Then the commentator asked, why don't they go to the States? As they were saving the American government for a period of 20 years. And he said, as an NGO, they are irritated because the US did not accept them, did not allow them in. I'm emphasizing this because I was hearing it for the first time. I don't have it on any papers I want to state. I was hearing it for the first time from that particular lawyer representing these individuals, that the United States did not allow them in. And that's why they thought they must come into South Africa. So that's where we are, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Minister and the Commissioner Mashapata for detailed brief to the committee. Members in attendance are Honorable Molekwa, Honorable Kanyile, Honorable Lokhwase, Honorable Tito, Honorable Van der Merwe, Honorable Rose, and Honorable Pile. I'll be advised when members have joined the meeting. Members who are going to interact with the two reports, then we'll allow the minister and the commissioners to respond just on two issues. Commissioner, if you can elaborate more, or perhaps the DG, now that the shared service is going to be hosted by Home Affairs, and we're noting that on the 1st of April, you'll be taking off completely from the institution, but because you've explained the budgetary constraints in terms of, or the reasoning behind why this shared service is going to be hosted, but servicing BMA. What are the process that are going to be engaged with the Auditor General when they're going to audit your financial system and perhaps accountability in terms of your governance? I think it relates both Home Affairs and the border management. Now that the shared service is located in Home Affairs, if you can elaborate more on that. The other issue, Minister, on the Afghan, I just want to check whether either Home Affairs or the law enforcement agency have profiled this 22 Afghans that were wanted to enter the country. And there's the affirmation, where are they in terms of, I think you preempted the question, where are they as we speak, and what are the prospects of us moving to that direction of appealing? Because society is concerned about their movement from other countries to the to Zimbabwe. I mean, to even to the border, to the extent that they've managed to navigate out to the courts. And I think the posture you are taking of appeal, I think we may need to consider supporting that. Let me allow Honorable Molekwa, Honorable Kanyile, Honorable Khwase, Honorable Tito, Honorable Van der Merwe, Honorable Roos, Honorable Pillay, to comment or raise questions on the two presentations. Honorable Molekwa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me start by appreciating the presentation has been presented, and also I appreciate the briefing we received from the Minister. Chairperson, we also acknowledge the progress by the BMA has been registered. We hope that very soon the BMA will be up and running. I just want to check with the Chairperson of the BMA that as we are approaching the Easter holidays, and we know that how busy will be, especially on the borders. Others will come to South Africa and others will go to their respective different countries. So I just want to check on coming April, will everything be up and running, especially with these outstanding administrative processes. They may not be able to hamper the progress so that the DMA will be fully operational in April. But otherwise, Chairperson, we take note and welcome the progress report has been presented and hope that more issues will be resolved. Has been presented, most of the challenges that are presented will be able to resolve by the affected department so that the DMA can be fully operational. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kanyile.
Very good morning to you, Chairperson, and to the colleagues online. I'd like to take this opportunity and appreciate the presentation we have received and the briefing from the Minister. Chairperson, I would also like to take this moment and acknowledge and appreciate the great work that has been done by this team. I think we are all aware that during the busiest periods in our country, people traveling in and outside of our borders, we have not been getting any reports with regard to the traffic congestion. I also remember at some point we ended up having to go to an oversight at the Beit Bridge and the Bombo border post because of the reports we're getting of the traffic congestion. So we truly appreciate their efforts in trying to manage the free flow in those borders. And we are hoping that we will see the same management of the borders now that we are going into the Easter period. Chairperson, going into the presentation, what I would like to know on the BMA is that, there was a presentation that was made that it is also going to take about a few months for the, I think the HR or the BMA people to investigate the salary discrepancies. I just want to know if they have any idea how long this process will take. The second question that I have, I would like to know the projected timelines for the rollout of the one-stop border post, and also would like to know what is the outstanding concerns during the staff consultation process, which could be a challenge to the people migration plan for April 2023. And Chairperson, zooming into the minister's report, we are noting the report, and yeah, it does look like the 22 individuals, the way they have handled their coming into the country leaves a lot of unanswered questions, especially if they are capable of going into another country and masquerade as holiday makers, and suddenly when they are in South Africa, they want to apply for asylum. I guess I would like to reiterate on the question that you have asked, that if maybe the department can be able to furnish us with the details of their whereabouts at the moment while they are busy with the process that they have embarked on. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Both Honorable Lokwase and Honorable Tito are struggling with the network. I'll check them later. Honorable van der Merwe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to you. Good morning to our Minister, our DG, and all our colleagues. And thank you very much for the presentation. You know, I think I completely share the outrage from South Africans in general about this Afghan matter. You know, Chairperson, I think it really amounts to a blatant abuse of South Africa, of South Africans, of the Minister of Home Affairs, of our entire department, and of our autonomy as a state. The fact of the matter is we've got laws, and as soon as we want to implement those laws, then you get these NGOs that run to the courts to compel us to do something else. And I'm really quite angry by this situation that we find ourselves in. And you know, for an American NGO to tell us about our international obligations Yet they themselves have got obligations. It wasn't South Africa that engaged in the war in Afghanistan. So surely they should be taking care of the refugees that are emanating from that country. And yes, we do have international protocols that South Africa must comply with. But Minister, I'm glad that you mentioned that you engaged with the Minister of DIRCO on this matter, but I wonder whether government will consider engaging with the ambassador, the US ambassador, because I think this is also a matter that must be raised at this level, because we are clearly being abused here. And then I wanted to ask the question around our legal assistance, the department's legal assistance, but you answered it in that, we cannot procure legal services outside of the department or outside of the state legal support that we get. But if government or cabinet is unhappy with the current situation that prevails, surely we should be able to, on an urgent basis, be allowed to to deviate from current procurement processes and get the best legal support for this department. And if we have to come and protest to get you that support, we need to do that, because really, I mean, you are asked to do the impossible, but if you don't have this support, then, I really don't know. So I would like to get an update from the DG in terms of whether we would be able to get an outside company to assist us. With regards, a legal firm that is, with regards to the appeal, if, for example, if we lose the appeal that we now are going to engage in, I wanted to know, how long do you think it will take for you to do an assessment on whether these individuals are legitimate refugees or not? Because we know there's a backlog in the system. Whether you are able to start the work now, possibly, and maybe also use that for your legal case. Because I think really also what adds to this madness is that they've crossed many borders of safe countries and then arrive at our sister country with tourist visas only to claim asylum here. I mean, it's really utter madness. But you also said, Minister, you said that the reason why these NGOs chose South Africa was because of our laws, that our laws are easy. You said that they looked at our laws and, of course, they found that it would be the easiest way to come to South Africa to enter. And I did see that the ruling party made mention that you might possibly withdraw or seek to withdraw from the Convention on Refugees, and as well as review laws in order for us to have a single legislation to deal with citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. And I just wanted to get some timeframes in terms of these reviews. Then on the issue of the BMA, I think we need to firstly wish the BMA well. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think we wish you well as you become fully operational. It is our wish that you obviously succeed and that you are effective. I did take note that last week during the question and answer session in Parliament, the Deputy Minister said that migration is an international phenomenon. And of course it is, but it has been South Africa's inability to manage migration successfully since 1994 that has caused a number of issues for us, and therefore the BMA is so needed. So my question really, a couple of questions around the BMA. The current budget that you've been allocated, or the current money that you will be working with, is 1.1 billion. But in the last meeting, it was mentioned that we need 8 billion. So what is the thinking in terms of how this budget will be sourced, considering the constrained financial environment that South Africa currently operates in? Also, during the presentation, there was a brief mention of corruption and ethical leadership. And of course, we would want to have ethical leadership in the BMA. But the struggle the BMA is going to face is that they are currently corruption, as was mentioned, is endemic in the system, especially where it comes to our borders. And many of the individuals that operate around the border have got entrenched interests in seeing illegal migration continue. So how will we be dealing with individuals that have been working there for many years and that are possibly involved in corruption? Are we doing a review of the of individuals and maybe do a sort of an audit? Because I think that is also exactly why SAPS, for example, gave the BMA some pushback because there are individuals involved in seeing that illegal migration continues. In terms of the setup, where will the Immigration Inspectorate function be incorporated into the BMA? What is the stated protocol between SAPS and BMA in terms of the BMA regulations on crime prevention on the 10-kilometer area from the border, if I can just get that information? And what role, if any, will the BMA be playing in terms of fixing the porous border that we've got between ourselves and Zimbabwe? And then finally, I'm going to ask, which I've been asking many a times before, and this goes again to, we're now speaking about the Afghan issue, we're speaking about the BMA, but our internal enforcement in terms of our immigration enforcement within our borders is lacking. And so, for example, we saw, I did mention it last week, we saw Minister Becky Cele mention the issue of the prevalence of foreign nationals, illegal migration, and how that impacts on his crime statistics. We saw news reports of Bangladeshi nationals being arrested for running a human trafficking ring just recently. But in general, there are daily reports of illegal foreign nationals being involved in criminal activities. And so then while we're fixing the BMA, while we're getting the BMA operational and fixing our borders, we cannot really, it doesn't take away from the crisis that is already within our borders. So again, I want to ask, considering that we do have limited abilities to enforce our immigration laws within our borders, what is the thinking around what we'll be doing going forward to identify and process or, document undocumented foreign nationals, or ensure that foreign nationals who are not within our borders are asked to go back to their own countries? Because even now, as we speak, you get daily newspaper articles about foreign nationals being in possession of either illegal documentation or fake IDs or fake passports. And we do need a plan in order to address that. I know, for example, at one stage, the SANDF partnered with the Department of Home Affairs in doing raids on some of these hijacked buildings, but we need a plan, and I just wanted to get the Minister's views on that. Thank you, Chairperson. I see you switched your camera on, so I'm done.
Thank you, Honorable Merve. Honorable Roos.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the Minister and Dr. Masiya Pato for the presentations. I'll start with the Afghan refugee issue. And I must start by also saying, I've been unable to find out why Afghan refugees are being brought specifically to South Africa via Pakistan, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. And so I agree with the proposal for that engagement with the US representatives on that one.
Chair, am I the only one, or have you lost Roos? I can't hear him anymore, Chairperson.
No. It's audible, Minister. I'm sure it's on your side.
Is it? It's dead. Oh.
And now?
No, Honorable Roos, sorry for that. Honorable Roos, I think Minister is struggling to.
All right.
hear you.
Oh, no, I can hear him now. I can hear him. He has just disappeared. Thank you.
Okay. You can proceed on, Roos. Sorry for that.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So on what the Minister said, it's true that a dysfunctional asylum appeal system and porous borders is making South Africa attractive. And these problems really urgently need to be resolved. But as legislators, we also need to stay level-headed and actually look at why the court ordered Home Affairs to allow the asylum seekers in. And the court basically said, implement your laws. We need to understand what those laws are. So Section 30 of the judgment basically said that the Home Affairs official exceeded their discretion to refuse entry to an asylum seeker. So that's in terms of our regulation 22.2. So those three grounds are for Form 17 not completed, asylum seeker has refugee status in another country, asylum seeker is a fugitive from justice. And so what they said is the official essentially just created their own grounds, namely a security risk, to refuse a asylum seeker. So there is a 2001 North Gauteng High Court order which halts the use of the first safe country principle by Home Affairs. So it has been court ordered, and it's been mentioned a few times in this committee about first safe country. There's no general recognized first safe country principle in international law, and our own courts have prohibited the use of it. And basically what it's saying is that we are obliged to individually assess an asylum seeker before returning them to a third country. So as much as there's no general first safe country principle, some countries have implemented specific treaties or legislation in this regard to prevent abuse of these systems. So an example is the European Union's Dublin Convention, or the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement with the Americas, or Australia's Third Safe Country Principle. But even in these cases, they're still legally obliged to do so in a manner that protects the rights found in international law. And so, Chairperson, I think we really need to look at this legal framework, because this is now happening on a technicality that the court correctly ruled that those persons needed to be able to come in. But something is clearly wrong when we are crisscrossing between several different countries to come to South Africa and seek refuge here. Chairperson, then going to the BMA, I concur with Honorable Kanyile that December was much better, but I want to plead with Dr. Masia-Pato not to just focus on Beitbridge. So yesterday I received complaints from Oshoek. On the Swazi side, it's taking 5 minutes to come into South Africa. On the South African side, it's taking a minimum of 40 minutes. And bear in mind, there's a lot of to and fro between those two countries. So when people try and take photos, the officials threaten them to delete the photos. Lebombo, Komatipoort border, similar complaints that it's much faster on the other side of the border than on the South African side. And there seems to be problems with generators, for example. So load shedding then affects these border posts. And there also are complaints that there's only one official on duty, despite there being several booths. So I think, Dr. Masia-Pato, we really also need to address these practical issues while we're implementing the BMA. They can't just be left. We need to ensure that there are power supply and backup at these border posts so that they're not offline for several hours at a time. And that, I cannot imagine there's one official at their post. So also to make sure that these officials are at their posts. Now, a question, Dr. Masia-Pato, is how much have we spent on the BMA to date? Because I want to understand what the public are getting here. It seems we now have a cohort of managers in the BMA that I imagine are replacing what we had in the Border Coordinating Committee. We don't have the funding, so SAPS is now continuing to do the policing services, and we have a few border guards that are being appointed. And then the administrative functions of the BMA are being done by Home Affairs. And then the existing staff are being moved from different departments into the BMA. So I'm really struggling to see, there was a promise here that we would have a lot more resources, we'd be able to cover these porous borders, and we'd be able to resolve this problem. And I'm not really seeing it with all this expenditure that is going on here. And still holds true that if we had taken that money, just got the coordinating committee to do their job and taken this money on more resources to monitor our borders, we'd be in a much better position now. But my question on this issue is, there's port immigration functions that are transferred from Home Affairs, we're told. What border management roles remain in Home Affairs organogram? Or have they all now gone across to the Border Management Authority? And then, Chairperson, again, we see nothing about the operationalization of the Coastal Border Guard. And the reason I keep going on about the coastal border is that there's a massive economic impact going on here with Chinese vessels which switch off their transponders, go into our territorial waters, plunder the oceans, and then go out and switch on their transponders again and disappear. So there's a massive cost in terms of environmental impact, tax revenues, and job losses. And at the end of the day, South African fishermen are then subjected to stricter and tighter fishing quotas. And so we have a national maritime security strategy, and that says that we are going to incrementally secure ports, coastal and oceanic domains. So please take us into your confidence. What is this incremental operationalization of this ramp up going to look like, and when is it going to start? And then finally, Chairperson, Dr. Masia-Pato, you mentioned unions, and yesterday Byron Place was closed by Nehawu. What is to stop unions from closing any of our borders at will? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ruas. Honorable Pile.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and greetings to all colleagues. Chair, let me first applaud the progress that has been made. I think it's important that, you know, when at the start of BMA, that there was lots of prophets of doom and naysayers that were obviously of the fact that this is just going to be another futile exercise. But we have seen so much of progress thus far, and I think we must be able to applaud that. Chair, on my side, I just have two questions in respect of BMA. One is, what are the projected timelines for the rollout of the one-stop border post? And the other one is, what is the regional structure of the BMA organogram? And then finally on BMA, just to find out in respect of the committee that they will be reporting to and oversight, will it still remain under Home Affairs, seeing as that there are going to be several ministers that are going to be part of this process, and whether it's still going to come to this committee? And then, Chair, to come to this very important briefing that we received from the Minister in respect of the Afghan, what has happened recently and the court orders, etc. Chair, I think firstly, the Minister has been doing everything that he could possibly do, and we must also appreciate the efforts on his side. And it is correct in saying that what it now looks like is that our country is sort of a free-for-all. And I'm saying this particularly because if you listen to how they gained access into our country, that you would go to other countries, then you get visitors visas, tourist visas, and then suddenly come through to South Africa. And the only reason that you applying for this asylum is that you feel that our laws are much more open and easier to be able to, for you to get or claim this, acquire this status. Now that tells me that we then have to strengthen our laws. And I think it's important that if Minister can be able to just update us on how we are going to be able to strengthen this, and also be able to not allow for this loopholes where they feel that it's easier. I mean, imagine going to other African countries, neighboring countries, and saying, no, South Africa is actually the easiest one that we can get access to in this way, and that South Africa will be the easiest way for us to be able to get this status. So let's go to South Africa. I mean, there was no real intention. If there was, then they would have come straight to South Africa and not via other countries. So clearly there is something that we have to do as a country, because we have to be able to protect the interests of our citizens. And I think that across the board, all South Africans are going to be concerned about this. And day in and day out, they raise concerns, and we must be able to act. And I think that this committee must then get a full and proper briefing on how we're going to be able to tighten this processes, but also to be able to, if need be, have to change the laws and legislation and acts so that we are able to strengthen protection of our citizens in the country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, Honorable Pile, Honorable Roos, Honorable Molekwan, Honorable Van der Merwe, for contributions. We're going to request Commissioner Mashiapata. You'll also delegate with other commissioners if they want to comment or respond to the issues that were raised by members and the comments. We'll then request the Director General to comment and respond. Then we'll invite the Minister to comment on the issues that arise from the members' contributions. Commissioner Mashiapata.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And thanks to the committee members for the responses. Indeed, Honorable Chair, I'll also ask Deputy Commissioner for Corporate Services, Madam Tupana, to reflect around how much have we spent as the Border Management Authority to date during this transition, and I suppose we should be able to respond to that. Let me then quickly run through the questions, Honorable Chair, and I'm not going to try to be more detailed, I suppose, based on the time realities. Now, in terms of the first issue raised by yourself, Honorable Chair, around the shared service vis-a-vis the auditing that is supposed to be happening with the, or by the Auditor General, whether would the auditing be to the BMA or to DHA on the basis that we are to be deploying a shared service model. So let me then clarify it this way, Honorable Chair, so that at least when we then talk auditing, we are able to appreciate the principle. So the issue of the shared service is not necessarily attaching the department, but it is more attaching the assistance. So the assistance in this instance will be more of a particular individual doing a particular function. But that particular function will not be doing that function as per Home Affairs principles or protocols or policies, but that person will be doing that on the basis of BMA policies and all. Now, when we talk auditing, the auditing will be done on the BMA. Not necessarily based on who did the job, but on the basis whether we have followed our prescripts, we have followed our protocols, we have spent the money in the manner it was supposed to, and we have achieved targets that we have set for ourselves. And that is basically the process. So a typical example in this instance will be, when it comes to the expenditures that we need to be doing, you'll remember we have indicated to yourselves that we will be securing our CFO very soon at the point of transition, meaning from the 1st of April. But before that CFO gets to the ground, then the CFO of Home Affairs then becomes our CFO. What does that mean? It means that CFO Holombi, simply put, is the acting CEO of BMA. And the assistance is going to give us is what the Auditor General will be auditing us on. Meaning, when they come to audit us on the financials, if they want the CFO's presence, then we are able to ask CFO Holombi to come, and then they will be able to interact with it, regardless of the fact that he works for Home Affairs, but it will be for the fact that he's the acting CFO for BMA. And that is the model of auditing. So that will be the same with all of the various portfolios that we will be assisted on. And maybe also just to indicate that the assistance, it will then be on the basis of us getting more capacity to close those particular areas. But as we have said, the challenge will be financial there and there, but we should be able to bring the fundamentals on the space. And that is the key. And by the way, Honorable Chair, so that we don't get to be maybe seen not to have done certain things, we were very much conscious of the fact that the CFO, as an example, is going to be key. But we couldn't get a CFO. And we have indicated already that the CFO for the BMA, the structure that it is, you wouldn't want just a graduate from high school. You need a very serious individual who is a chartered accountant practically. Now, in the transitional arrangement, we couldn't get a CFO at the level that we would want a CFO. Otherwise, we couldn't have appointed a CFO at a director level with an annual salary of 900,000. Otherwise, we're not going to get the CFO as the CFO required for this. So I'm just using the CFO as an example, but that will cut through the process. I can assure the committee members, either in terms of doing the work or even in terms of auditing, there is not going to be any confusion. And the model is well set. And by the way, Treasury has the model itself. Now, Treasury knows of the model. And that is why the shared service model is not necessarily going to be applied, I will say, the first time. But we acknowledge the challenges that comes with it. And that is the pressures. I mean, if the CFO is asked by the DG to do certain things in the department, but at the same time, we want him, as an example, you can already understand where the priorities are going to lie for him. And those are the challenges that we need to traverse. And those are operational issues. The only issue which is key is obviously to be able to get the resources necessary. If we can then move quickly to Honorable Malekwa around the approaching of the festive season and the whole issue that there will be a lot of traffic and all of that. And the question that Honorable Malekwa is asking is whether these administrative challenges, meaning these aspects where we are going to be assisted on, how will those then affect the operations, as an example, on the ground? What we can then say to Honorable Malekwa and the committee members around the issue of our preparedness for Easter, I had already indicated that we had used a model during December. In that particular model, we have considered it to be effective. Part of that was creating, for example, bypasses for the small vehicle. In other words, separating all the modes, as it were, and all of that across the ports and all of that. So all of those things had assisted very much in terms of traffic management. Again, we put too much or a lot of effort on corridor management, which we had to do with a lot of stakeholders, RTMC included, local traffic included, the police included, and all of those. So those are the models that we are going to be deploying in this festive season of April. So what we can assure the committee members is these issues that we are dealing with here are not necessarily going to affect the actual operations on the ground. And by the way, we have already, for example, sent a request to the minister for the increase of the operating hours, as we always do, but at the same time also requesting the increase of the officials on the ground to be able to assist in managing the festive operations, as we always do. And we are fairly very much confident that we should be able to deal with the festive, the Easter that is coming. In terms of the issues raised by Honorable Kanyile, how long will it actually take us to investigate or to deal with the salary issues? Let me put it this way, Honorable Kanye. We had to first enroll the colleagues in the BMA space. Because remember, we have consciously put people's salaries as the #1 priority. Once you make an error in that space, then negativity emerges on the spot. Then labor gets activated, then everything collapses. So when it comes to this part, we are very much meticulous. What does that mean? One, by 1st April, we are bringing everybody on the BMA space. So people will be paid their last salaries by the original department on the 15th of March and also on the end of March, because people are paid in different pay dates. Now, from 15 April to the future is going to be by the BMA. Now, once we run that particular stuff, we run it as per the current status quo, meaning we run it as the people used to get. So that has to be done very meticulously with no error. Then in that particular period, as we do that, we are then starting the process. What does that mean? We are then activating our job profiles. We are activating the competency-related processes, and we are juxtaposing the people having come on board and the work that they must start doing practically. And in operational sense, from a labor relations point of view, you could simply say people are paid for almost April for the work they did in March, if you can then be scientific about it. And the reason why that is the case, we are trying to say, as the people are being trained, then they're transiting. And in that transition, then on the 2nd month, we should be able to have now started the standardization. But the implementation, we are looking at on the 3rd month, so that we don't create any challenge. Remember, if you make an error and you put somebody at maybe at a higher level, bringing it down becomes another labor relation issue. That is why we cannot make any change. So we've given us a period of 3 months, all in all, to be able to deal with those particular issues. And as I have said, labor is part of the process, and we are doing everything according to the book. The timelines for the OSBP. Honorable Kanyile, the OSBP, let's put it this way, and I think maybe the minister might also want to touch on it. You will remember that the implementation of the OSBP, particularly on the 6 ports, there are prerequisites, and the prerequisites is the redesigning and the redevelopment of those ports. And for us to reach there, we have done this request for proposal, which we submitted to National Treasury, primarily because we want to do the public-private partnership. So on that particular basis, this particular work of redesigning the port, because it is a big project, it has been listed with Infrastructure SA in the presidency, and it is being managed at that level. And then we need the Treasury to give us the authorization. So what I can report just for today to the committee is we are now at the advanced stages to get the request for proposal published, because we have already just addressed all of the questions that has been raised by the National Treasury. And the DG is here, he has just written a letter to address all of the latest questions that they've raised. By the way, they also wanted us to align our issues with SARS, which we did, and therefore there is no any other outstanding. Once they receive this letter from the DG, then they should be able to activate the RFP. Once the RFP, which is the request for proposal, is issued to the market, then we should be able to get the service provider under the triple P, then we need to start redesigning. So according to the 5-year target we've put, we said that over a 5-year period, we're expecting that everything will be running. But in terms of dealing with the question you're asking, I will say the RFP, we're expecting it to be out at least latest by April. Now, once it is out, all the processes of supply chain will kick in, which can then take us to almost June, July or so, and then we'll be able to deal with the rest of the other issues. Let me then conclude, Honorable Chair, with Honorable van der Merwe's issues. Managing of the migration successfully, the 1.1 billion and how much. Yeah, I think this part is the one that I said the Deputy Commissioner will then respond to. The issue of corruption and all of those, the people who are already part of the corruption in the space. Honorable van der Merwe, you will remember that we are going to do the vetting of all of the colleagues on the ground. And additional to that, we'll be doing continuous lifestyle audit. But additional to that, we are going to be implementing an integrated model of work, meaning the multi-agency approach had a lot of loopholes in this particular process. And therefore, when we implement an integrated approach, that on its own starts to close those vulnerabilities for corruption and fraud. And those are the interventions that we think is going to be assisting. So, Honorable Chair, the issue of the protocol with SAPS, we can confirm we've already signed that, and everybody is set in as far as that part is concerned. Let me then move quickly to respond to Honorable Ruos. The first question obviously will be responded to by the DG, I suppose, around the inspectorate. Maybe Honorable Ruos around focusing on Beitbridge. Let me indicate that we are not necessarily focusing on Beitbridge only. You will remember in December, for example, we have been to Libombo, and then from Libombo, we have been to Maseru Bridge, we have been to Fixback, and we have been to Beitbridge. So those are the top, I would say, 4 spots that are very much problematic in terms of the work that we are doing. Hence, we put more of the effort on that. But we also agree that there are other challenges, like in Oshhoek, for instance, and that is mainly around capacity and all of that. Hence, the issue of the processing time and all of that. But we should be able to deal with those issues when we start to operate practically on the ground. The issue of power supply, we agree on that. Hence, we have to make sure that we have generators for all of the ports and all of those kind of issues. Yeah, I think the rest of the other issues, Honorable Chair, without, because I see the challenge is time. The last issue is just on Honorable Pillay. I've responded to the timeline on the OSBP. Honorable Pillay, in terms of the regional structures for the BMA, remember we had said BMA will have 1 head office, will have 4 regions. And then in those particular regions, we are going to have what we call a regional commander. In that particular environment, below the regional commander, we will have a assistant regional commander in a way, which is an assistant manager responsible for the regional targeting center. We will have the other one responsible for running operations, as well as law enforcement in all of the region to support the work at the ports, but we'll also have a manager responsible for specialized services, which is all those areas of immigration, agriculture, environmental, and health, and we'll have another manager responsible for corporate support. So that is how the region will look like, and I can't go into the deeper details because of time-related issues. Maybe the last one, Honorable Chair, is the question whether BMA will still be reporting to the Parliamentary Committee on Home Affairs. On this one, we can answer it by saying the political principle of the Border Management Authority remains the Minister of Home Affairs. That is administrative and all of that. He will still be the one who then goes and do vote for our finances. The finances will still go to Home Affairs. From Home Affairs, they get transferred to us as they currently do for the IEC. But in terms of substance, meaning in terms of core work, we then report to that team of ministers that the minister has spoken about, the Interministerial Committee on Border Management. As we report to that committee is then bringing 10 ministers, and those ministers come from other portfolio committees, which then means that the chair of the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, when you call us to present on substance issues, you might then need to do an inter-parliamentary committee meeting. For example, you might bring your colleagues from health side, colleagues from agriculture side, then it becomes a multi-parliamentary committee, as it were. But in terms of administrative work, it is exactly here and all that. And I think for that one will be guided by yourselves, because in any event, that's your area. Thanks, Honorable Chair. If we can just maybe allow Madam Tupana to just reflect on the expenditure-related issues. I think, yeah, the issue might be time as it were. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Commissioner, for that comprehensive response. Commissioner Tupana.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And I just want to touch a bit on the question that was raised by Honorable Tagle, just to add on to what the Commissioner had already reflected on regarding the harmonization. Commissioner rightfully indicated the part that we will prioritize, which is the harmonization that relates to employee salaries. We shouldn't give the committee an impression that it's only salaries that require harmonization when you have an integration of this nature happening. There's also a harmonization of policies, which we will be doing over time, subject to the fact that indeed the one prioritized for the first few months would be the salaries. And I want to give this example, Honorable Chair, because this is a matter that relates to how the ports would function and the challenges that had been experienced in the ports over time. We are inheriting people, some of whom are not classified as essential services. It is only port health that is so far classified. And there's no harmony between the policies. For example, your overtime policy. In other departments, you rely more on overtime to have port efficiently being run. And that has got implications on budgets, of course. We will immediately be initiating a process to apply to have the work of the Border Management Authority classified as essential services in terms of the Labor Relations Act. We've already started engagements with the relevant committee in the CCMA, and this is something that we will also prioritize once we're done and also parallel with the salary issues, because it does impact very negatively on our budget if we would not do it, but it will also impact on harmony within the ports. If other people can work shift when others can work shifts, all those elements that would make it difficult for us and perhaps make us look like we are unlawfully discriminating and not treating members equally. So I just wanted to reflect on that and quickly go into Honorable Van der Merwe's question on the budget. Indeed, you rightfully indicating that as we were here on the 28th, indicating how much we get in relation to how much we had planned if the BMA was to be rolled out in line with the strategy that we had put in place. We will continue, and we are already initiating a process to start engaging with Treasury from May, preparing for October. We will continue to put up a business case. But honorable members, we would also rely on your assistance and support in this regard, because if the work of the BMA is going to be funded in this manner, and when I'm saying in this manner, I'm reflecting on how Treasury normally treats budget. You have a baseline, and that baseline is going to be used to determine the future funding. Now, if we are going to be taken from this baseline where we are now, and the funding flowing normally like it does into your 4%, 6% increment over the years, then it's going to take us more than 10 years to realize what we want to achieve with the Border Management Authority. And the scary part of it is if we are not pushing sufficient funds to be able to stop what is referred to as a porous borders timeously, one would wonder whether there would be any country by the time we realize the resources that we are looking to getting. Simply put, I'm trying, honorable members, to say we need more funding to be pushed earlier. We understand the fiscal environment in the country, but shifting the post in this one, it's like you are saving money, but in the long run, you lose the country. So we really need to have a balance, and we are trusting that the committee head in the BMA, who would still be the Minister of Home Affairs, would be assisting us to make sure that as we push from our front with Treasury, we're also having your support. Lastly, just on the question raised by Honorable Ross on a budget, I'm just summarizing what we presented last week on the 28th when we were here, indicating how much we had spent and how much we are projecting to spend by the end of the year. We had been given by Treasury 78 million to implement the interim structure, the transitional structure that was put up for the BMA, that was approved by the DPSA in February, and from March, the department had been assisting us populate that interim structure. So the 78 million was meant for that, and that structure, the part that's populated so far, it's 80% of that is the border guards. So that is what we're spending money on. We also have Home Affairs having reprioritized funds, 67 million and the 18 million on the border infrastructure. That money is the money that's being utilized towards the tools of trade, to includes the uniforms, that includes the firearms, that includes the vehicles and everything else that is required by the border guards. So all in all is 163 million, Chairperson. And when we were here last week, we indicated that there is a likelihood that just about 10% of that is not spent, meaning that saying that BMA would probably for this year spend 145
Chairperson? Chairperson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I don't think members they are able to hear. Because I mean, she even Mr. Pillay wrote a message on the site, struggling to hear.
Commissioner Mashapat, I'll request that let's put down the responses in writing and circulate them to the committee, the response in detail. But also advise that it's the second time the commissioner is struggling with the network in an important committee meeting. Last week we had the same challenge, and today we may need to see how we correct that. If she was acting commissioner today, you are not in, it means we're going to have challenges of the presentation. So let's look on that in our next interaction with the Border Management Authority. We know that there are challenges of network throughout, but I think collectively we may need to be alert in terms of the space we're going to engage it. Commissioner Tupana will note your frustrations in terms of the network. Will receive the responses in details. DG?
No, morning, Chairperson. Good morning to the Minister and honorable members. Let me then start with the question that Honorable van der Merwe has asked with regards to the state attorneys and the briefing to the senior counsel. I suppose one of the most frustrating things, Honorable van der Merwe, it's the process that state attorneys uses to get your best legal counsel. They embark on a process of quotation. And in our engagement, Minister will recall, with some of the best legal minds in the country, they don't respond to the system of quotations. And we now are working with them to try and find a way to get on board senior counsel that can really provide us with the legal opinion. As of this morning, they were still trying to circumvent their own process to bring on board some of the legal or senior counsels that we've recommended. Maybe at some point you might want to ask them to come and appear before this committee, because it is really frustrating. You're quite right on a matter that's quite important for us. And as you know, state litigation is the sole mandate of the State Attorney's Office in terms of the State Attorney's Act. Honorable Rose, I suppose the issue that you're raising with regards to our own capacity as we move some of the functions to the BMA, you'll recall that in terms of our first business case, it moves us from 39% to about 42%. We've now finalized the second business case, which we will be submitting to National Treasury to capacitate in particular some of those areas that we've identified, the inspectorate being one of them. At least the minister has directed that we must move at least to 55%. And that's what we're trying to finalize. Just to go back to a response that the BMA provided earlier on, Chairperson, you'll recall that in our previous APP for the Department of Home Affairs, when we presented before you, we had indicated that as part of the transitional mechanisms, one of the conditions that Treasury gave to us as the Department of Home Affairs was that we must continue to provide support to the BMA, amongst others in the following areas, which will be finance, procurement, IT, HR, until the BMA has fully filled those positions. So it was one of the conditions in the letter that we had received for the allocation in the 22-23 financial year. So that's what we're doing. Chairperson, you have asked a very difficult question on the Afghans as to where are they. As you know, we don't have a mandate beyond the borders of South Africa. But in the last response, in my engagement with the Chief Immigration Officer, Ms. Gono in Zimbabwe, on the 19th of February, she indicated that they were initially booked on a flight from Air Botswana, which was supposed to depart Robert Mugabe International Airport at 10:45 to 11:45. That's arrival in Lusaka. This was flight BP 323 Air Botswana. That was since abandoned. And then they left on an Emirates flight, UAE 714, which departed Harare at 18:45 and arrived in Lusaka at 19:50. And that's where we are told they were booked at a hotel. And from our own information, as I've said, we do not have legal mandate beyond the borders of South Africa, but we are interacting with authorities on the ground. And as of last night, we were informed by our own embassy that's where they are at the moment. Until anything otherwise, we'll then be able to revert back to the committee. So that's my responses to the questions, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Minister?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just have a few things to answer. Maybe let me start with this issue that the DG has said about how to acquire legal representation in the present situation in the State Attorney's Office, because it might not really be clearly understood. Prominent senior counsel in the country are not just not responding to quotations. It looks like in their profession, they are actually forbidden that they can't tout for work like attorneys. And so, because it's like touting for work when they issue a quotation and you respond to it. So they don't respond professionally. We do not understand why the State Attorney's Office insists on still issuing quotations, but their argument is that it is in the PFMA, that you must go into the market, people must contest. And as long as that stays, we're going to have problems. Those who respond to the quotations are junior ones who don't worry about their professional integrity. Unfortunately, I have to put it that way, because the real senior counsels, which you see most of the time in the Constitutional Court, will never respond if you just issue a quotation. And that's where our undoing is. Having said so, Chairperson, a few questions. Honorable Kanyile asked about time frame for OSPP. OSPP has got two two areas of concern, or two areas that are important to it. The first one is just the policy, the act. You are aware that it is out now for public comment, or the cabinet has passed it to go out for public comment, in which case it will then come back and then we send it to Parliament to start processing the bill into an act. That's where we are. The second part of OSPP is infrastructure, especially in the 6 busiest ports of entry. And the commissioner have already responded to you. We are eagerly waiting, and almost every week I phone the Minister of Finance to ask them to respond to our, by giving us permission to go out on requests for proposals. That's where we're stuck at this juncture. Honorable Van der Merwe, the issue about us approaching the American embassy through DERCO. This matter was debated many times, Honorable Member, but it's a little bit a tricky one. Tricky because the American government has never at any juncture contacted us about Afghans in whatever way. They've never done that. The people who are doing so call themselves American NGOs. And our argument is we can't hold a government responsible for each NGOs because NGOs form outside the realm of government. So up to so far, and I'm not saying in future we may not, but up to so far, we don't find our way through to go to the American embassy. And I don't know what do we say to them when they arrive, because there's no indication that they sent anybody to represent them in this matter. Then the issue about how long, Honorable Van der Merwe, if they eventually come in terms of the court ruling, how long will it take to process them? Because there's a backlog. Honorable members, I've tried to clarify this issue many times, but it might be a little bit sometimes confusing. Refugee reception centers don't have any backlog whatsoever on people applying for asylum in South Africa. There's no backlog, I must insist. The backlog that exists are those people who applied for asylum, never qualified. In other words, they were rejected by the RSDO, the Refugee Status Determination Officer, on the basis that they don't qualify. They then appeal, and the appeal process is elaborate. It's one of the things in our laws we want to change. The appeal process is unending, Chairperson, because you can appeal to do different bodies. The Refugee Appeals Committee, RASA, or the Standing Committee on Refugee Affairs, SCRA. After you have gone through those independent committees, you can still go to an open court and start from the beginning. That's where our problems are. So the backlog is that one. That is the backlog which we are dealing with the United Nations. When they gave us the 143 million rand over a period of 4 years to hire lawyers who must help us in the backlog. The problem with that is that even if we have got no backlog on the initial applications, we know that all the people who are in line for initial application will subsequently appeal. We don't know anybody who doesn't qualify, who has been rejected, who doesn't look into the appeal process. It's an unending ladder, as one of the judges once said. The other issue which Honorable Van der Merwe said, the ruling party in this policy conference and in the last national conference decided that we must pull out of the United Nations Convention. That's not exactly how it is. We notice, Honorable Van der Merwe, that when the United Nations Convention came into being in 1951, when countries acceded to it, many of them, if not almost all, put up certain reservations. In other words, they will say, yes, we accede to the convention, but on this one and that one, our country won't be able to. Mostly the reservations are on economic grounds, on sometimes religious grounds, political. In other words, where a country says, look, this convention, I accept to be part of it. But this particular part, I'm sorry, my country cannot afford it on such and such and such grounds. Now, unfortunately, South Africa was not there because we're still an apartheid state. We came to accede to the convention in 1996. And we've just noted from records that it looks like we never deposed any reservations. And I think that's where our weakness is. So we are not saying we must withdraw as a country from the convention. We are saying we must be allowed to depose reservations like any other country did. At the moment, the only major country I know which has not acceded to a convention is India. For the past 70 years, they've refused. Not that they don't take refugees, but they take them on their own, on their own. In other words, they are not pushed by any convention. Nobody can write this type of letter to them and saying, we remind you of your obligations under international conventions, because India never signed this convention. But many other countries signed, but deposed very serious reservations, which we demand to be given an opportunity to do so. If we did something wrong in 1996, we can't be punished for life. Basically, that's our argument. And we have even sent our ambassador to UN to go to the Secretary General office to discuss this matter with them. And that's where we are stuck, because they don't seem to be enthusiastic about it. The issue from Honorable Ruos, that officials created their own decisions on security measures, whereas the law says something else. Yes, that might be true, because judges rule perhaps solely by what is in the act. But you must be aware, honorable members, that security is a very important consideration for our men and women at the borders. One mistake we did, which I accede to, is because from 1994, Home Affairs was regarded as a group of clerks who just stamp documents, etc., not as a security department. And maybe that's why we are here where we are. You are aware that in many countries, including the US and UK, the department is called Department of Homeland Security. In South Africa, it was not like that. And perhaps our laws were based on that assumption and understanding. It's only now that we know we are a security department. That's why Home Affairs in the government clusters was only taken to the JCPS cluster, the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security cluster, only 4 years ago. All throughout this period of democracy, it was classified together with administrative clusters, which is where our weakness has been. So when we took this document to the ruling parties conference, was that we need to overhaul all this issue about the issues of migration and regard them as security. So that's why we teach our people at the borders, especially in the BMA, that you are now in a security environment, and this is what you must watch out, you must open your eyes. That's why the commissioner has just mentioned that they've even received a certificate that they are a law enforcement. That certificate was written by the Minister of Justice. If you are to be a law enforcement officer with a gun or a weapon and where you can use it, the Minister of Justice is supposed to give you a certificate for that, and they have received it. This is something that is new for Home Affairs. It has never happened before. And maybe that's where our weaknesses are. And I agree fully with Honorable Ruos that we need to look into these laws. And very soon we'll be bringing them to you as members of parliament to show you the areas that needs to be changed so that we get out of this problem. The issue of coastal border problems, Honorable Ruos, you are definitely right. There are problems there. But if you look at the BMA Act, it says the BMA must be operational at the land ports of entry, at the airports, at the seaports, even the coastal borderline. You are aware that the land borderline in South Africa is about 4,772 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. yes, 4,000 and 700 something kilometers. The coastal borderline, on the other hand, is 3,900 and something kilometers. Now, we are not operational there as BMA, regardless of the fact that the Act is saying so, because it needs huge amounts of resources, both financial, personal, and in terms of equipment. I mean, we don't even have a single boat. The BMA or the Department of Home Affairs does not even own a single boat, not to mention the corvettes and all the other sophisticated mode of travel on the water to protect our assets. So we said, in the meantime, we will leave this to the army, fully to the army, to take care of the coastal borderline until BMA is fully operational with both money and staff. Because as the commissioner said, our staff is still very low. You might be aware that the police who operate at the borders are 6,000 in number. On the other hand, BMA has got only 600 border guards. The other 1,900 people who are coming, the commissioner has actually showed you exactly in which categories they fall. Honorable Brendan Pillay, yes, you said the same thing about strengthening the laws and closing the loopholes. I think you are perfectly right. This is one area that is a big homework for us. But I've given a background why maybe we might have arrived at the laws that are not good enough for security. And this is seen as a weakness by people from other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thanks very much, DG, the Commissioner and Commissioner Tupana. Thanks very much, members, for the contributions and guidance on how we must interact with the presentations or areas of focus. The committee, we note the progress made by the BMA in terms of its work. We also affirm the preparations as we're going to the Easter period, but also on the 1st of April, so we'll be standing as an entity with the support as outlined by the Commissioner, some of the services by the Home Affairs Shared Services. But I think the committee will take collective support that to support this Border Management Authority, its work. However, we're concerned in terms of the budget allocation. I think the Commissioner Tupana firmly raised that there are key areas that need to be implemented during the period, so that some of the issues that our communities have been raising for over years in terms of the porous borders and how we can mitigate these issues. So the committee, we raised this concern in our last border when you're presenting the budget or the financial injection. We'll have to interface with other portfolio committees in terms of this area as indicated. But I think we take confidence on your continuous engagement with the Treasury in terms of the business case that we have submitted for their attention to respond to the issues that the committee has been raising. But so far with the allocated budget, we need to stay ground to make sure that the objectives set by the Border Management Authority are off take. We note there that there's a matter of the Afghanistan's minister, and I think also you have clearly articulated the changes of the laws that I think will bring before the committee for the committee to interface with. I think the committee take exception on the conduct of the process that was undertaken by the Afghanistan, and we're firmly concerned, and Parliament must take interest on this matter. The process that we are undertaking to appeal received support from the portfolio committee. We may need to see how we navigate the agents in terms of securing the legal team that will assist us to interface with that process. I think the committees take exception in terms of the the NGOs that are all over trying to manage the Home Affairs, manipulate the system. So I think as a law enforcement agency, Minister, we need to take more interest, to pay more interest, so that you avoid the next intake of a grouping that will be coming. Once we get into this phase, you may not know that in the next time or year or month, there's another grouping that is on standby to enter the country. So we may need to deal with that speedily. But also I think it's important, Minister, to do a proper profiling of those who are currently trying to get into the country, that to satisfy ourselves and the safety of our community. The engagement with the ambassadors is quite important, Minister. I think we're happy at DG that there's constant interface with the ambassadors, but also it's important to interface also with ambassadors in our neighboring countries. I'm sure that within their law, they might have broken even the laws of that country. I mean, Honor Ross has been articulating that point. We mean also to take that front to interface closely with the ambassadors who are in the neighboring country, particularly in the Zim area. And I think take more interest with DECO, Minister, in terms of closely monitoring this space. Members will then take off this presentation. Thanks very much. And the Minister and all the responses that have been presented by the team. The committee will monitor the issues that we've commented on, will get a report. This matter of the Afghanistan will continuously interface with it, Minister, as the committee, just to make sure that we were on the same page with the department on this matter. We'll stand off this item, and then we'll request, we invite Mr. Matonsi to update us on the two issues, and Mr. Salmon on the strategic planning. Then we stand off the meeting. Mr. Matonsi.
Chairperson?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I will start with the update on the registration of the Muslim Marriages Act. You will recall, Chairperson, this bill was referred last year, and then the first reading was supposed to have been done in 2022. And then because it was not done in the NA, and then it lapsed, I think about a week ago, the National Assembly revived this bill and other bills. And then on the 16th, which is next week, there will be a first reading of the bill in the National Assembly. So that's the progress so far, Chairperson, on this bill. I can go through the others, and then if there are questions, then I'll answer all of them together. On the study tour, Chairperson, you recall that we met with the House Chair last week on the 1st of March, because initially the study tour on this electronic voting was to go to the US and Brazil. Then, but when we met with the House Chair, he indicated that no, probably we should consider going to one country. And then because countries like Brazil has got electronic voting and has got similar conditions. So then there was a suggestion that no, we should consider going to Brazil. And then they will be allowed to go there for a period of about 7 days. So the proposed dates that we had in mind, they are not different from the dates that we had initially, because initially we were proposing the date of the 16th of June during recess until the 30th. So we just cut days that we were supposed to go to the US and go to Brazil, probably around the 16th of June to around the 24th of June. That's that. And then I have sent letters, Chairperson, to members of the committee. The majority of them have applied for official passport. There's just few that I still need to get copies of the official passport to send them together to DECO. You recall, Chairperson, initially the letter to the Minister of DECO was sent for both countries, but now they want us to revise. But this time also they want us to send copies of the official passport for the not verbal. And then I'll jump the straight plan. Adam will go through it. On the IEC commissioner, there is an advert, Chairperson, that I've posted on the WhatsApp group, that the term of office for the vice commissioner of the IEC, it will end around the middle of April. So the court, the Constitutional Court, has advertised the vacancy. The closing date is this coming Friday. So, Chairperson, I will be monitoring this so that once the CVs and it's referred to us, and then we are able to process this on time. I'll give to the update on the strat plan to Adam. But before that, was that initially the strat plan, we were planning to have it on the 28th until the 31st. And then, but the chairperson is going to be attending a compulsory meeting of the chair of chairs on the 27th and 28th. So then there was a suggestion that we should move our days to 29 to until the 1st of April. So, but Adam will go into details in terms of the program as well. That the study tour will be, no, not the study tour, I'm sorry, the strat plan will be in Pretoria. So that's that, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Eddie, can you flight the okay, yes, he's busy flighting the presentation now, or the draft program. Members will see that, so we're going to conduct the oversight and workshop over 3 days. The first day on Wednesday, the 29th of March, we'll receive briefings from the Department of Home Affairs, GPW, IEC, and the BMA on their annual performance plans for the coming year, as well as an update on their outstanding issues for the 5-year term from 2019 to 2024. Their strategic targets over that 5-year period, so that we can start looking at what issues are still outstanding before the end of the current Parliament and the current government. So we've allocated a period of time of around 45 minutes for each of the entities to give a full briefing of both the historical progress and the time that they will be using to address, or how they'll be addressing this going forward. We then we also have tea breaks and questions and answers, and then a lunch break factored in. Then the second day, on the 2nd of on the 30th of March, on the day 2, we will be conducting an oversight to the permitting section of the DHA to receive an in-person update on the outstanding issues from that permitting review and how it's impacting on delivery of services, given the continued delay in the delivery of some permits, and the outcomes of the recommendations from that permitting review report. There might also be time for us to attend, visit a regional office of the Department of Home Affairs, perhaps the new Menlyn office that's opened in a shopping mall, or the Pretoria regional office in the afternoon. And then on the 3rd day, on the 31st of March, we'll be conducting our own strategic overview. This is for the committee itself, without necessarily the other members or the other committees and other departments there, where, based on the input we received on the first day, we'll factor it into our oversight and start planning on our legacy and our outstanding issues. So then, first looking at a draft legacy report from our outstanding issues in the morning, followed by a discussion and a tea break. We'll then be doing a decision-making exercise based on training that we've been receiving on improving decision-making and better team working as a team, also in the morning. Then we'll break for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we'll deal with the committee's annual performance plan or business plan for the year coming, and then also debate on how we can tweak that for the year ahead, for the final year of this sixth parliament in this committee. And then we'll have a closing by the chairperson. So those are the 3 days. Also just to indicate that we've structured the 3 days like this so that I have a day in between when the oversight is happening, so I have to have some time to implement some of the inputs from the entities in the department into our plan before presenting it or discussing it with members on the Friday. So this is how it stands at present, Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The agenda for strike plan, particularly on the speakers, will relook on that and see. I know that there's 2 invitations from Parliament of speakers that may join the strategic planning. So we'll look on that. That's a framework, members and minister. I'll request minister to comment first in the DG on the framework, including the marriage bill. I know that this bill that has been revised is a private members bill, but also check where are the process with the minister. I'll start with the minister and come to members. Minister?
Let me comment only about this issue of marriage and the private members bill, Chairperson. You will be aware that the white paper on a new marriage regime for South Africa has been discussed and finalized after a lengthy period of a green paper, if I must say, where there were lots of hot debates. Now, 3 weeks ago, Parliament passed for public comment or endorsed for us to go out for public comment 2 bills. That was the one-stop border post bill and the bill on new identity management and registration. On the day we submitted them, we also submitted the new marriage policy, the new marriage bill for South Africa, which was going to be an omnibus, I'm sorry about that, omnibus bill, which covers all the areas where there's a problem, including the fact that Muslim marriages are not recognized by law, Jewish marriages are not, Hindu marriages are not, and certain traditional marriages also, especially in the royal families. There are types of marriages that are practiced by royalty in the country, but are not recognized any law. We've included them in all those. Unfortunately, that bill was not passed through the cabinet committee. They found certain areas that still needs to be followed up, especially between us and justice in terms of marriage and divorce, because there's a very thin line between developing an act on marriage and a marriage on divorce. Somewhere they interact, and cabinet committee believe that the interaction between Home Affairs and Justice has not yet been clarified. We subsequently wrote a letter to the Minister of Justice asking for that meeting as requested by the cabinet committee. Now coming to the private members bill. Yes, I received a copy of it, and we also have a meeting with Honorable Member of Al-Jama about it. Our feeling is that everything that the private members bill would like to achieve can be achieved through this Marriage Act by them giving us a copy and we integrate. Actually, we have already checked many things are actually similar. There are only 2 areas which seems to be problematic, and I want members to know about them. Chairperson, I want to explain them and how we are going to solve them. One of them, which Mr. Hanif Hendricks complained about bitterly, is the humiliation which Muslim families experience when one of them passes on, because the death certificate come written never married, whereas they married by Sharia law. That means they married by Muslim rituals. But when one of them passes on, is written never married. And he says that is one of the areas of humiliation which Muslim communities cannot tolerate, and that's why they want their own act in order to deal with things like that. He actually submitted several death certificates issued by Home Affairs, written never married. Now, I must say to you, honorable members, that I only knew about this issue of death certificate of married people coming as never married when my own mother passed on in August 2019. I personally went to fetch her death certificate in one of the Home Affairs offices here in Tshwane, in Mamelodi. And I was shocked when I got into the car. I looked at it, it written never married. I actually went back to the funeral parlor to ask them why on earth will they do something like that? And embarrassingly, I got very embarrassed because they told you, oh, but this is your department. We don't issue death certificate, this is your department that issues them. And they wrote never married. I then asked my officials, it so happened, honorable members, they say the National Population Register came into being in 1986. That's when we started registering people on the National Population Register, including marriages. Before that, any marriage certificate you had was a manual paper written to you, appearing in no database, including the National Population Register. Then people were called upon to come and register their marriages, those who got married before 1986, backwards. That means anybody who was involved in any marriage, 1986 backwards, was supposed to go to Home Affairs to try and report that marriage so that it get registered in the National Population Register. Unfortunately, from the records I've checked, I don't think there was any loud campaign or loud call for people to come. That's why my own parents were included in this, because they married long before, obviously, 1986. As far as when I was born, they were already long married. That's why I was so shocked and embarrassed. And I agree with Mr. Hanif about that type of embarrassment. But it looks like they never went to register it when after 1986. So our solution was this, Chairperson, and I spoke to the DDG of Civics, that they must issue a circular to all the Home Affairs offices. Any person who married by Sharia law or Muslim rituals, who comes to Home Affairs to ask for a death certificate, they must then be asked to bring in the evidence of that marriage via Muslim or Sharia law, and immediately that be registered on the National Population Register immediately. Then immediately a death certificate issued, which is written married, because that definitely is a marriage. You may remember that this is nothing new, because customary marriages were also not registered, but the Customary Marriage Act was passed in 1998, which said anybody who married customarily must come to Home Affairs to register. Quite a number of people still up to now have never registered, which means their death certificate will also come as never married. So it's not something that is done to Muslim communities only, but we believe we can resolve it. I avoided saying we must make a call that they must come and register, because many people may not even hear that call until they are in trouble, like when they see a death certificate. That's why we thought the right way to correct it, where it has the most, is when they get death certificate. That is the first thing. The second thing was about Matrimonial Property Act and marriage, Chairperson. As you know, when you get married in South Africa, there are certain property issues which must come into being when it so happens that we divorce. Either people marry either in community of property or out of community of property. Many South Africans don't know this. They just get married. No antenuclear contract. They don't sign anything. They just get married because they are happy. They love each other. Only during divorce, then they realize problems, because the law takes a view that if you did not choose the marriage property regime, which you want to get married into, then it is assumed that is in community of property. It's a default position, in other words. In the new act, which I said we still have to release, we are proposing that this should not be the case. All marriage officers, regardless of religious or national background whatsoever, all of them must be made to choose which property act do they choose. Do they choose out of community of property with accrual or without accrual, or do they choose in community of property? Those three. Now, it so happened that any one of those, when you choose, you need a contract. And Mr. Hanif was worried that many people, when you need a contract, you need a lawyer. That many people don't have access to lawyers because of their financial circumstances, and they don't think this will serve them. So I made an undertaking, and I subsequently was informed last night that actually in many magistrate offices, so that will develop as part of the new act, a pro forma form about marriage contracts where people will be told that this is the type of marriage, that's the other type, etc. Which one do you choose? And once they've chosen a particular one, we give them that pro forma form, which is a contract, and then they sign it. Those are the issues that we wish to offer the Muslim community via Al-Jama. But it ended there because Mr. Hanif was still adamant that they need that act which they've presented, that private members bill. And as you are aware, we don't process private members bill. It is in your hands, honorable members. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for that update. It's not yet in our committee. I think the minister was just debriefing us on the process that they're engaging and the interaction thereof. Members, if there are comments on the issues Mr. Matonsi raised in particular and Mr. Salmon raised, we can raise. Let me just check if there are issues to raise. Honorable Mulekwa.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have any comments. I'm okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Kanyile. Honorable Van der Merwe has a network problem. Also, I think she has been kicked out. Honorable Ruas and Honorable Pile.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just noted that the letter of naturalization was part of our bundle for this meeting. Is it included in the discussion now?
The letter for
Chairperson?
Yes.
Yeah, no, there was a letter from the minister, which normally they do it every year, where they have given naturalization, early naturalization to individuals from other countries. So for the last year, they've indicated that no, there was no one who was given early naturalization. So it is by law that they have to submit it. So I submitted. I sent it to members not to discuss it, just to see it.
Okay. Can you deal with the three areas which are comments? Then I'll propose an advice on how we must deal with that letter noting. Is there any matter on the issues raised? Comments, members? Honorable Rose?
No, Chairperson. I think we'll wait for the process to unfold with the Muslim marriages bill.
Okay, noted. Honorable Pile?
Thank you very much. Chair, mine is firstly on the study tour. If I may just ask, what was the rationale behind agreeing on Brazil over the US? I understand that we were saying that we're not going to go to two countries. That's understandable, and you're going to go to one. And perhaps we can just get clarity on that, on why we choose one over the other. And then the other one is on strat plan. It's 3 days and it ends on the Friday. And I'm just saying that, do we have sufficient time in terms of discussions on the 2 days? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think in principle, we agree that it's going to be a strict plan on those dates. As I've indicated, we will look on the issues that are drafted, the draft program. And I think you're raising an important point for more discussions, but observations on the key issues that require the committee. We'll look at that, and before the date, we'll give interaction on the issues. We'll interact with the DG, the Government Printing Works, and the IEC on particular issues that I think they will be focus areas, looking back since we have been the 6th Parliament, but also look on the previous legacy report of the 5th Parliament. I think we'll then come back to the committee. The second point that we've interacted with the chair, most of the committees are preparing for study tour on this subject or the other. And there's an observation that there's a budget challenges. So that's why we've identified Brazil. Remember the 4 countries that were identified, 2 from the BRICS and the US. I can't recall the other one. Mr. Matonsi will assist me, but we then agree that we'll focus on Brazil. There's an assessment in terms of the modalities that are related to our setup here in the country and the status quo. So I think that has assisted us to take that decision. So those are the 2 issues that I think will able to deal with it. Is that sufficient, Honorable?
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. On the letter, Mr. Matonsi, that you have circulated, because we thought that is purpose for noting, let's bring it in the next committee meeting, that item, so that we don't confuse. Members may not have gone through the correspondence because it was not raised. I'll suggest that we deal with that matter in the next committee meeting. Honorable Rose, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a thumbs up.
Oh, so, yeah. Mr. Matonsi, any announcement?
The other announcement, Chairperson, which I did not talk to here, when we met yesterday in the Menko, it was also agreed that the meeting next week, it should be a virtual meeting, and then that the physical meeting, we should start them in the next term, and then we alternate between virtual and physical meeting on a weekly basis. That's all, Chairperson.
Okay. I think let's rework that space program for next term so that all our stakeholders, Home Affairs, IEC, Government Printing Works, and any other stakeholder were able to deal with that. And also we'll see how we're going to interface with the police and defense on the matter, and other committees on the matter relating to the border management authority issues, on how we're going to have an inter-session for a broader briefing, informed by now that the interministerial committee involved 10 or so ministers, so that information in terms of this of the border management authority is clearer, and all the committees involved are able to have the same process of understanding of where is the border management. If not the case, we'll then communicate with the committees to invite the BMA and the Minister of Home Affairs to give them a brief on the issues that are relating to the BMA. Thanks very much, members. Thanks very much, Minister. Thanks very much, DG and all your team, the Border Management Authority commissioners and your team and members for this fruitful and engaging process. Thanks very much. The meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.